What would you do if minutes before your wedding, your future mother-in-law set your dress on fire? Aurora had spent months preparing for the happiest day of her life. But just before walking down the aisle, she stood frozen, watching her dream gown turn to ash. And at the center of it all, Bernice Wilson, the woman who refused to let her son marry a nobody. But what Bernice didn't realize was that this wedding wasn't about the dress, it was about love. And Aurora wasn't backing down. Stay tuned to see how she turns this disaster into the ultimate act of defiance. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. I stared in disbelief as flames consumed my wedding gown. The ivory satin that had taken 6 months to perfect now reduced to a smoldering, blackened ruin. Smoke curled toward the ceiling, the acrid scent stinging my nose. And standing before me, manicured fingers still gripping a silver lighter, was Bernice Wilson, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, triumphant breaths, her face twisted in satisfaction. "Now you can't marry my son," she declared, voice shrill with hysteria. "Cade needs someone from our social circle, not some nobody from the wrong side of town." She slung her designer purse over her shoulder, looking immensely pleased with herself. "My name is Aurora Mitchell, and at 25, I never imagined I'd be watching my wedding dress burn just 30 minutes before walking down the aisle." My 3 bridesmaids stood frozen in shock, their lavender dresses a sharp contrast to the blackened remnants at my feet. "Mrs. Wilson," I said, my voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside me, "you have no idea what you just did." She laughed, brittle as breaking glass. "What I did? I saved my son from the biggest mistake of his life. You think a community college degree and a job at a local ad agency make you good enough for a Wilson? My Cade belongs with Melissa Hammond. Her father owns half of downtown Cleveland." I reached for my phone and pressed a button, my gaze locked onto Bernice as I did. Behind me, Kendra moved quickly to crack open a window, fanning the smoke away. "The wedding's off," Bernice continued, waving a dismissive hand. "I'll tell everyone you got cold feet. Cade will be upset, but he'll understand eventually." "Are you sure about that?" I asked, turning my phone screen toward her. The color drained from her face. "What? What is that?" "The wedding live stream," I said calmly, watching the realization dawn in her widening eyes. "For Cade's grandparents in Florida. For my sister, who's deployed overseas. It's been running for the past 20 minutes, capturing everything the guests arriving, the musicians setting up, and now you, setting my wedding dress on fire while making it very clear exactly how you feel about me." Bernice's breath hitched. Panic flickered across her face before rage took its place. "Turn it off!" She lunged for my phone, her perfectly styled hair slipping from its place. "You planned this! You set me up!" Kendra stepped between us, her stance unwavering. "Mrs. Wilson, everyone just watched you commit arson on live video. I think you should take a moment to consider your next move." My phone buzzed in my palm, notifications lighting up the screen. Brooke glanced at it and gasped. "It's Cade! He's coming up to the bridal suite!" Bernice's eyes darted wildly, her breaths coming in short, frantic bursts. She scanned the room as if searching for an escape route. "This isn't what it looks like. I was just testing the fabric. Wedding dresses are supposed to be flame retardant." I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the one who needed to explain herself. Bernice Wilson had done that all on her own. And soon enough, Cade would see her for exactly who she was. From my phone, we could hear murmuring from the gathered guests. The camera angle had shifted. Someone had taken control of the live stream and now showed the wedding party's reaction. Cade's father sat stone-faced in the front row. Cade's best man was already rushing toward the building. Most telling was Cade himself, no longer waiting patiently at the altar, but sprinting up the center aisle, his face a mask of shock and fury. "Aurora," my bridesmaid Skylar whispered, "what are we going to do about the ceremony? Should we tell everyone to go home?" I looked down at the smoldering remains of my dream dress, now just blackened scraps on the antique hardwood floor. The practical part of my mind, the part that had put myself through college while working 2 jobs, was already calculating next steps. No, I said firmly. The ceremony is happening, just differently. The door burst open. Cade stood there still in his tuxedo, his eyes moving from my face to his mother to the ruined dress on the floor behind him. The venue manager and his father appeared, both looking horrified. Mom, Cade said, his voice dangerously quiet. Tell me I didn't just watch you burn Aurora's wedding dress while saying she isn't good enough for our family. Bernice's demeanor changed instantly. Sweetheart, you don't understand. I was protecting you. This girl has been after your money from day one. I was testing her character and— Stop! Cade cut her off. Stop lying. I heard everything. He turned to me, his eyes softening. Val, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she would do something like this. I stepped carefully around the burnt fabric, moving toward him. It's just a dress, I said, though we both knew it was much more than that. But your mother just showed exactly what she thinks of me, of us, in front of everyone we know. Cade took my hands in his, seemingly oblivious to his mother's sputtering protests. What do you want to do, Val? It's your call. Before I could answer, Mr. Wilson appeared behind Cade, his expression grim. Bernice, what have you done? His voice was low, controlled, but with an edge I'd never heard before. Walter, please, Bernice pleaded. You know the Hammonds would be a much better match. Their family has been part of Cleveland society for generations, as opposed to Aurora, who built a successful career through hard work and determination. Mr. Wilson shook his head in disgust. You've gone too far this time. My phone continued to buzz with notifications. I glanced down to see messages pouring in from guests who were watching everything unfold on the live stream. The venue coordinator hovered in the doorway, looking uncertain. Miss Mitchell? She said hesitantly. The guests are asking what's happening. Should we make an announcement? I looked at the ruins of my dress again, then at my bridesmaids in their lavender gowns. A plan was forming in my mind, one that would turn Bernice's attempt to sabotage our wedding into something entirely different. Tell them there's been a change of plans, I said, but the ceremony will proceed in 20 minutes. Bernice scoffed. In what? Your underwear? You can't possibly— In my backup dress, I interrupted calmly. The room fell silent. Cade looked at me in confusion. You have a backup dress? I hadn't, of course, but 6 months of working with temperamental clients at the advertising agency had taught me to always have a contingency plan. Skylar, I turned to my bridesmaid, remember that photo shoot we did for Cleveland Bride last month? Call Eliza and ask if her sample dress is still available. Skylar's eyes widened in understanding. The ivory sheath with the lace overlay? It should fit you perfectly. Cade's father stepped forward, pulling out his phone. I'll have my driver pick it up immediately. Where is it located? As they coordinated the dress retrieval, I turned back to Bernice, who stood watching in disbelief as her plan unraveled. You really thought a dress would stop this wedding after everything Cade and I have been through? But everyone's watching, she hissed, gesturing at my phone. They all saw what happened. Yes, I agreed, they did. And now they'll also see what happens next. I turned to address the camera directly, knowing the guests were still watching. To everyone waiting, thank you for your patience. The ceremony will be slightly delayed, but love always finds a way, even when someone tries to burn it down. A cheer erupted from the phone's speakers, the guests in the ceremony space showing their support. Cade's grip on my hand tightened, steady and reassuring, his eyes shining with nothing but pride. Mom, he said firmly, you need to leave. Dad will take you home. You are no longer welcome at our wedding. Bernice's face twisted with fury. You would choose her over your own mother after everything I've done for you? Cade didn't hesitate. After what you've done today? Absolutely. The next 20 minutes blurred into a whirlwind of movement, while security escorted Bernice out after Mr. Wilson, looking both apologetic and exhausted, insisted on it. Eliza from Cleveland Bride arrived, carrying not one but 3 stunning sample dresses. The bridal suite instantly transformed into an impromptu fashion headquarters, my bridesmaids, the venue coordinator, and even some of the female guests jumping in to help. This one, Kendra declared, holding up an elegant ivory sheath dress adorned with delicate lace. It's perfect for your figure, and we can have it ready in minutes. The venue's seamstress, originally hired for simple alterations, worked her magic with quick stitches and an impressive number of safety pins. Meanwhile, Cade had returned to the ceremony space, addressing the guests in person and through the live stream that someone had thoughtfully positioned toward the altar. I could hear his voice, strong and unwavering. "Today didn't start the way any of us expected," he told them, "but Aurora and I have always believed that it's not perfect circumstances that make a marriage work. It's how you handle the imperfect ones together." Applause filled the air. Skylar adjusted the borrowed veil on my head and stepped back, beaming. "There. You look absolutely stunning." The dress wasn't what I had planned to wear when I became Mrs. Cade Wilson, but as I turned toward the mirror, I realized it suited me perfectly simpler, more elegant, and, in a way, stronger than my original choice. A reflection of me, adapting to circumstances rather than being defeated by them. A gentle knock at the door made us all turn. Mr. Wilson stepped inside, his expression softening the moment he saw me. "Aurora, you look beautiful." Then, his face shadowed with regret. "I want to apologize for Bernice. Her behavior was inexcusable." "You don't need to apologize for her, Mr. Wilson," I said. "You didn't burn my dress." He nodded, the relief visible in his eyes. "Cade sent me to tell you that everyone's ready whenever you are." Then, with a small smile, he added, "Your boss from the agency is here. Apparently, he's documenting everything for what he calls the greatest viral wedding marketing campaign Cleveland has ever seen." I laughed. Trust Eddie to see a promotional opportunity in disaster. If the advertising world had taught me anything, it was that the most compelling stories often came from overcoming unexpected challenges. The venue coordinator appeared at the doorway. "We're ready when you are, Miss Mitchell. The musicians are prepared, and we've adjusted the lighting to complement your new dress." I hesitated as an idea sparked. "The live stream is still running, right?" When she confirmed it was, a slow smile spread across my lips. "Then let's project it in the ceremony space for a few more minutes," I decided. "I want everyone to see us walking from here to there, the whole journey, not just the arrival." 10 minutes later, as my bridesmaids and I made our way through the venue's garden path toward the ceremony space, I knew every step was being broadcast to the waiting guests, not as a traditional bridal entrance, but as something more powerful. A statement that nothing, not even a vindictive mother-in-law with a lighter, could stop this wedding. As we approached the doors to the ceremony space, I could hear the guests' applause growing louder. Cade waited just inside, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Ready to get married?" he asked, taking my hand. "More ready than ever," I replied, squeezing his fingers. The ceremony that followed wasn't the one we had rehearsed, but it felt more authentic than anything we could have planned. As I walked down the aisle in my borrowed dress, guests rose to their feet applauding rather than maintaining the traditional reverent silence. Their faces showed not just the usual wedding joy, but something deeper: respect, admiration, solidarity. Cade's father stood proudly in the front row, occasionally glancing at the empty seat where Bernice should have been. His eyes met mine briefly, conveying wordless support. Our officiant, Pastor Mitchell, no relation, though we joked about it, improvised beautifully. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness not just a wedding, but a triumph of love over adversity. Aurora and Cade have already faced their first challenge as a couple, and they've met it with grace, resilience, and unwavering commitment to each other." During our vows, Cade added lines that hadn't been in our rehearsal. "I promise to stand by you against anyone who tries to come between us," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the room and beyond to those watching the live stream, especially if that person is from my own family. When it came time for the exchange of rings, a moment of panic crossed Cade's face. The rings had been with his mother during the pre-ceremony preparations. Mr. Wilson quickly stepped forward, producing the velvet box from his pocket. "I took the liberty of retrieving these earlier," he explained quietly, "just in case." After we were pronounced husband and wife, the celebration that erupted seemed to release all the tension that had built up throughout the afternoon. As we walked back down the aisle, I noticed Eddie, my boss, filming discreetly from the side. He gave me a thumbs up that somehow managed to be both professional and genuinely emotional. The reception that followed in the Grand Pavilion's ballroom had an atmosphere unlike any wedding I'd attended before. Instead of polite conversation and standard wedding rituals, there was an almost festive defiance in the air. Someone had hastily created a custom Snapchat filter featuring a phoenix rising from ashes with our names underneath. "Your wedding is trending locally on social media," Kendra informed me as we entered the reception. "People are using # rising from the ashes and #can't-burn-love." Cade's college roommate Tom, who worked in public relations, approached us with his phone. "The Cleveland Plain Dealer wants a statement." Their lifestyle editor saw the live stream. "Apparently her niece was a guest, and they're calling it Cleveland's most resilient wedding." "Tell them we're just grateful for everyone's support," Cade replied, his arm secure around my waist. "And that true commitment means facing obstacles together, not running from them." As the evening progressed, I noticed Mr. Wilson speaking intensely with various family members, damage control evident in his gestures and expressions. Cade's Aunt Diane approached our table during dinner, leaning down to speak privately. "Walter is beside himself," she confided. "Bernice has been escorted home, but she's threatening to cut Cade out of the family business if he doesn't come to his senses. Walter told her that after today, she's the one who needs to worry about her position in the company." Cade squeezed my hand under the table. "Dad's always been the backbone of the family," he said. "Mom just never realized it because he let her think she was in charge." As our first dance began, I couldn't help but notice the empty tables near the front of the room, spaces reserved for Bernice's country club friends who had quietly disappeared after the incident. In their place, colleagues from my advertising agency had moved forward, filling the void with genuine support. "Mr. Wilson is handling damage control like a pro," Eddie commented, approaching us after the dance with 2 glasses of champagne. "He's personally thanking everyone for staying, while subtly letting Bernice's allies know they won't be missed." Cade nodded, watching his father work the room with newfound respect. "I think this is the first time I've seen him stand up to her so publicly," he murmured. 27 years of marriage, and today was his breaking point. The wedding photographer initially hired by Bernice approached us cautiously. "Mrs. Wilson, the younger Mrs. Wilson," she clarified with a smile. "I've captured some beautiful moments today, but I wanted to ask about the dress incident. Some of the guests took photos. Would you prefer I requested they keep those private?" I exchanged glances with Cade before answering. "Actually, I think honesty is the best approach here. This is part of our story now." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. The short clip of Bernice setting fire to my dress had already been viewed over 20,000 times on a local Cleveland news page. The comment section overflowed with support interspersed with stories from other brides who had faced difficult in-laws. "You might not have planned it," Eddie said, scrolling through the comments, "but you've started a movement. Standing strong in the face of toxic family relationships is resonating with people." Cade's cousin Mia appeared at our table, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and determination. "I want you both to know that not everyone in the family shares Aunt Bernice's views," she said firmly. "Most of us think she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." "Thank you, Mia," I replied, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." As the evening progressed, Cade received a text from his father. He read it silently before showing me the screen. "Your mother has locked herself in the guest house. She's demanding I choose between her and that girl. I've informed her that her behavior today has made my choice remarkably easy. We'll discuss next steps when you return from your honeymoon. Proud of you both. Dad." "Are you okay?" I asked Cade quietly, searching his face for signs of regret or doubt. "I'm better than okay," he replied, squeezing my hand. "For years, I watched Mom undermine Dad, belittle you, and manipulate everyone around her. Today, she finally showed her true colors to everyone, not just us. It's like a weight has been lifted." As the reception continued, I noticed something remarkable happening. Guests, who had been stiff and formal at the beginning, Bernice's side of the family and social circle, were now relaxing, engaging more genuinely with my friends and family. Without Bernice's watchful eye, the artificial social barriers she'd maintained were dissolving. "Mrs. Wilson," the venue coordinator approached with an unexpected smile. "There's something you should see." She led us to the entrance of the ballroom. There, prominently displayed on an easel, was a large photo frame filled with dozens of handwritten notes from guests. The heading above them read, "Messages of Love and Resilience for Aurora and Cade." "Your bridesmaids organized this," she explained. "They asked guests to write messages of support after what happened." 1 week into our honeymoon in the Maldives, the full weight of what had happened at our wedding was still unraveling. Cade and I sat on our private deck, the endless expanse of crystal blue waters stretching before us, scrolling through messages during our daily check-in with reality. "Dad says Mom's staying with her sister in Cincinnati," Cade muttered, setting his phone down. "Apparently, Aunt Linda is the only person who still believes her version of events, that she was testing the dress fabric and everyone just misunderstood." I adjusted my sun hat, a small smile tugging at my lips. Hard to misunderstand someone screaming, "Now you can't marry my son," while holding a lighter. The Cleveland media had turned our wedding fiasco into something of a local legend. What began as a wild story of an unhinged mother-in-law had morphed into a larger discussion about toxic family dynamics and the importance of setting boundaries. Women's magazines had even reached out, asking if I'd be willing to share my experience on how to maintain a healthy marriage despite difficult in-laws. Eddie says the agencies had 3 new clients specifically request the team with the wedding dress phoenix. I laughed, holding up my phone. "He wants to know if we'd be open to joining a panel on crisis management when we get back." Cade took my hand, his thumb brushing over my wedding band. "Only if you want to. We don't have to make this a spectacle if you'd rather keep it private." I thought about the flood of messages from couples who had faced similar struggles, people looking for reassurance that love could still thrive despite family opposition. "Maybe our experience can help others," I said softly. "Not how I expected to start our marriage, but at least it would be real." Cade smiled. "Like us." 3 months later, we attended the Wilson Family Foundation's annual gala, our first major public appearance since returning from our honeymoon. Typically, Bernice had orchestrated every detail of these events, but this year, it had been completely reimagined under Mr. Wilson's direction. "Nervous?" Cade asked as our car pulled up to the Cleveland Art Museum. "A little," I admitted, smoothing the emerald gown I wore, a stunning piece from Eliza's boutique, the designer who had turned our wedding debacle into a powerful campaign about resilience and second chances. Inside, the change was palpable. The air was lighter, the rigid formality replaced with a warmth that had never existed before. Mr. Wilson stood at the entrance, looking years younger without Bernice's overbearing presence. "There they are," he beamed, embracing us both. "The couple who inspired our foundation's new initiative!" He led us toward a display highlighting the Wilson Family Foundation's latest program, Rising Phoenix Grants for Women Starting Over After Difficult Life Transitions. The foundation's logo had even been redesigned, now incorporating a subtle phoenix motif. "We've already approved funding for 15 women," Mr. Wilson said proudly, each one rebuilding after incredible challenges. As we moved through the room, I realized how much had changed beyond the decor. The guest list was different. Gone were the social climbers and the status-obsessed acquaintances. In their place were people genuinely invested in the foundation's mission. "Mrs. Wilson," a young woman approached, her voice steady but emotional. "Your wedding story gave me the courage to leave my toxic marriage. Now I'm starting my own business." Later that night, Cade and I slipped away to the museum's terrace, stealing a quiet moment beneath the glow of the city skyline. As I rested my head against his shoulder, his phone buzzed. "Mom's coming back to Cleveland," he said, his expression unreadable. "Dad says she's agreed to counseling if she wants any chance at reconciliation." I squeezed his hand. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together, just like we did with the wedding." He turned to me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Some flames are meant to destroy," he murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Others just reveal what's unbreakable." What do you do when the biggest day of your life is nearly destroyed not by bad luck, but by someone who was supposed to be family? Would you crumble under the weight of betrayal, or would you rise from the ashes? Aurora had every reason to give up. Watching her wedding dress burn at the hands of her future mother-in-law was more than just an attack on fabric. It was an attempt to erase her place in Cade's life. Bernice believed that wealth and status dictated love, but she underestimated one thing: Aurora's resilience. Instead of letting the moment break her, Aurora adapted. With a calm mind and unwavering determination, she refused to let Bernice's cruelty define her wedding day, and Cade, he proved exactly where his loyalty lay. He stood beside Aurora, not just in words, but in action, banishing his mother from the ceremony and refusing to let manipulation dictate his future. Their love wasn't built on fairy tale perfection, it was built on facing challenges together. Now, Bernice is left to face the consequences of her actions, while Aurora and Cade move forward, stronger than ever. Their wedding, meant to be a picture-perfect event, became something even better, a symbol of love that couldn't be burned away. So, what would you have done? Would you have gone through with the wedding, or would this have been the final straw? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The shrill ring of my phone pierced the air, shattering the fragile peace I'd managed to cultivate during my rare day off. I knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. Simon, my husband, the man who'd turned my life upside down with his latest scheme. "Caroline, we need to talk about Mom." Simon's voice crackled through the speaker, tension evident in every syllable. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Simon, I thought we settled this yesterday. I can't quit my job to take care of Patricia full-time. It's just not feasible." "But she needs us, Caroline. She's my mother, for God's sake. She had a terrible fall, and you're a nurse. Who better to look after her?" I felt my blood pressure rising. "I'm a nurse at the hospital, Simon. That's my career, not a convenient skill set for you to exploit whenever it suits you." "Exploit? Is that what you think I'm doing?" His voice rose an octave. "I'm trying to take care of my family." "And what about our family, Simon? What about our future? Your business venture failed. We're barely staying afloat as it is. My job is the only thing keeping us from financial ruin." There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Simon spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. "So that's it then? Money is more important to you than family?" I felt as if I'd been slapped. "How dare you? I've supported you through thick and thin. I stood by you when you quit your stable job to chase your dreams. I've been the one holding us together while you've been off playing entrepreneur." "Playing entrepreneur?" Simon's voice dripped with venom. "I was trying to build a better life for us." "And how did that work out, Simon? We're drowning in debt, and now you want me to quit my job to become your mother's full-time caretaker? The same mother who can't stand the sight of me?" "She doesn't hate you, Caroline. She's just difficult." I laughed bitterly. "Difficult? That's the understatement of the century. She's made it clear from day one that I'm not good enough for her precious son." "Look, I know it's not ideal, but—" "Not ideal?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Simon, your mother fell down the stairs because she refused to use the walker we bought her. She won't listen to reason. How am I supposed to care for someone who won't even accept help?" "She'll listen to you if you're there full-time. You just need to give it a chance." I closed my eyes, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Simon, I can't do this. I won't do this. I love you, but I won't set myself on fire to keep your mother warm." "So that's it? You're choosing your job over my mother's well-being? Over our marriage?" His words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not fair, Simon. You can't put this all on me. We're supposed to be a team." "Well, it doesn't feel like we're much of a team right now, does it?" The bitterness in his voice was palpable. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "Simon, please, we need to talk about this rationally. Can you come home so we can discuss this face-to-face?" There was a long pause before he responded. "Fine. I'll be there in an hour. But Caroline, something's got to give. We can't go on like this." As the line went dead, I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. How had we come to this? The man I'd loved since high school, the life we'd built together, it was all hanging by a thread. And as I sat there waiting for Simon to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that our conversation was going to change everything. I remember the day Simon dropped his bombshell like it was yesterday. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow through our kitchen window as I stirred a pot of pasta sauce. Simon burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. "Caroline, I've got big news, he exclaimed, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I turned, raising an eyebrow. Oh? Did you get that promotion? He shook his head, grinning from ear to ear. Even better. I quit. The wooden spoon clattered to the floor. You what? I quit my job, Simon repeated, his eyes sparkling. I'm starting my own business. I felt the blood drain from my face. Simon, are you out of your mind? We have a mortgage, car payments, and we've been talking about starting a family. How can you just quit without discussing it with me first? His smile faltered slightly. I thought you'd be happy for me. This is our chance to build something of our own, to secure our future. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. And what exactly is this business? It's a tech startup, Simon explained, his enthusiasm returning. We're developing an app that will revolutionize the way people shop for groceries. It's going to be huge, Caroline. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to share in his excitement. But all I could think about was the mountain of responsibilities we had and how precarious our situation had suddenly become. Simon, I love that you're ambitious, but this is a huge risk. What if it doesn't work out? He cupped my face in his hands, his eyes boring into mine. It will work out. I promise. I've done the research, I've got investors lined up. This is our ticket to financial freedom, Caroline. Don't you trust me? And there it was, the magic words. Trust. How could I tell him that while I loved him with all my heart, I didn't trust his judgment on this? How could I express my fears without crushing his dreams? Of course I trust you, I said softly, hating myself for the lie. I'm just worried. This is a big change. Simon's face lit up. I know it's scary, but think about it. In a year or two, we'll be set for life. No more worrying about money. No more living paycheck to paycheck. We can start that family we've been talking about, buy a bigger house, travel the world. His enthusiasm was infectious. And I found myself getting caught up in the dream. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was our chance at a better life. Okay, I said, forcing a smile. Let's do it. But promise me you'll be careful. We can't afford to lose everything. Simon pulled me into a tight embrace. I promise, Caroline, I won't let you down. As we stood there in our tiny kitchen, the forgotten pasta sauce burning on the stove, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of a cliff. I wanted to believe in Simon's dream, to have faith in our future. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered that this could be the beginning of the end. Later that night, as Simon slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. How would we manage if his business failed? Could our marriage survive if I became the sole breadwinner? And what about his mother, Patricia? She'd never approved of me, always hinting that Simon could do better. How would she react to this news? I turned to look at Simon's sleeping face, so full of hope and determination. I loved him, but at that moment, I realized that love might not be enough to weather the storm that was coming. As I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. What have we done? The harsh, fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor seemed to mock me as I rushed towards the emergency room. My scrubs were wrinkled, my hair a mess, but I didn't care. I'd just received the call that would shatter the fragile peace I'd been clinging to for months. Caroline! Linda, my friend and fellow nurse, called out as I rounded the corner. I'm so sorry. I know you weren't supposed to be on shift tonight, but... I waved her off. It's fine. What happened? Linda's face was grim. It's Simon. He was brought in about an hour ago. Alcohol poisoning. My heart plummeted. What? But Simon hardly ever drinks. Well, he's certainly made up for lost time tonight, Linda said, her voice laced with concern. Caroline, it's bad. He was rambling about the business, about losing everything. I think he might have tried to hurt himself. I felt the world tilt on its axis. This couldn't be happening. Not Simon. Not my Simon. As if in a trance, I followed Linda into the ER. There he was, my husband, looking small and broken on the hospital bed. His face was ashen, dark circles under his eyes. An IV drip snaked into his arm, and the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the room. Oh, Simon, I whispered, taking his hand. What have you done? His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. Caroline? Is that you? I'm here, Simon. I'm here. He tried to sit up, but I gently pushed him back down. The business. He slurred. It's gone. Everything's gone. I've ruined us. My throat tightened. Shh, don't worry about that now. Just rest. But Simon was beyond rest. He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "I'm so sorry, Caroline. I promised you the world, and I couldn't even keep the lights on. I'm a failure." Tears stung my eyes. "You're not a failure, Simon. We'll figure this out. Together." He shook his head, his eyes wild. "No, you don't understand. It's worse than you know. The investors, they're threatening to sue. And your savings. I used your savings for the last push. It's all gone." The room seemed to spin. My savings? The money I'd been squirreling away for years, dreaming of opening my own clinic someday. "Simon, tell me you didn't." But I could see the truth in his eyes, clouded as they were with alcohol and shame. He had done it. He'd gambled everything. Our future, my dreams, on his failing business. "I thought I could save it," he mumbled. "Just needed a little more time, a little more money. I was so sure." I pulled my hand away, feeling as if I'd been burned. "How could you, Simon? How could you do this without talking to me?" "I didn't want to worry you," he said, his voice small. "I thought I could fix it." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Fix it? Simon, you've destroyed everything we've worked for, everything we dreamed of." Suddenly, the door burst open, and Patricia stormed in, her face a mask of fury. "What have you done to my son?" she screeched, pointing an accusing finger at me. I stood up, my own anger rising to meet hers. "What I've done? Your precious son nearly drank himself to death and bankrupted us in the process." Patricia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "Don't you dare blame Simon for this. If you had been a better wife, supported him properly." "Enough," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of it. "I have supported Simon through everything. I've worked double shifts to keep us afloat while he chased his dreams. And now I find out he's thrown away our entire future without even consulting me." Simon stirred on the bed, reaching out weakly. "Caroline, please." But I was beyond listening. The weight of everything, the stress, the betrayal, the shattered dreams came crashing down on me. I looked from Simon to Patricia, these two people who had taken so much and given so little in return. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I won't." As I turned to leave, Simon's broken voice followed me. "Caroline, don't go. I need you." I paused at the door, my hand on the handle. Without turning back, I said, "You should have thought of that before, Simon, before you gambled with our lives." And with that I walked out, leaving behind the ruins of the life I thought I knew. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the early morning silence, jolting me awake. I fumbled for it, my heart racing as I saw Simon's name on the screen. After everything that had happened, I almost didn't answer. But something, instinct maybe, made me press the green button. "Caroline?" Simon's voice was frantic. "It's Mom. She's had an accident." I sat bolt upright, sleep forgotten. "What happened?" "She fell down the stairs. She's at St. Mary's. Can you come, please?" I closed my eyes, torn between my instinct as a nurse to help and my anger at both Simon and Patricia. "Simon, I don't think." "Please, Caroline," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "I know things are bad between us, but she's asking for you. You're the only nurse she trusts." Guilt washed over me. No matter how I felt about Patricia, I couldn't ignore a patient in need. "Fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The hospital was a whirlwind of activity when I arrived. I found Simon pacing outside Patricia's room, looking haggard and unkempt. "How is she?" I asked, professional mode kicking in. Simon ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Broken hip, possible concussion. They're running tests now." I nodded, steeling myself before entering the room. Patricia lay in the bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, then quickly narrowed. "Oh, it's you," she said, her voice weak but still carrying that edge of disdain I knew so well. "I suppose Simon called you." I approached the bed, checking her vitals out of habit. "He did." "How are you feeling, Patricia?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Like I fell down a flight of stairs. How do you think I'm feeling?" I bit back a retort, reminding myself that she was injured and frightened. "Can you tell me what happened?" Patricia's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw past her prickly exterior to the vulnerable woman beneath. "I was trying to get the mail. I didn't want to use that blasted walker you and Simon got me. I thought I could manage, but—" She trailed off, a tear sliding down her cheek. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. I took her hand, surprised when she didn't pull away. "It's okay, Patricia. You're going to be all right." Just then, Simon walked in, his face a mask of concern. "What did the doctor say?" I turned to him, slipping into nurse mode. "They're still running tests, but it looks like she'll need surgery for the hip, and she'll need round-the-clock care during recovery." Simon's eyes met mine, and I saw the unspoken question there. Before he could voice it, Patricia spoke up. "I won't go to a nursing home," she declared. "I won't be shipped off like some unwanted parcel." Simon looked at me pleadingly. "Caroline, I know it's a lot to ask, but—" "No," I said firmly, cutting him off. "Simon, I can't quit my job to take care of your mother full-time. We've been over this." Patricia's grip on my hand tightened suddenly. "You'd abandon me in my time of need? After everything I've done for you?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Everything you've done for me? Patricia, you've never approved of me. You've criticized every decision I've made since the day Simon and I got married." "I was trying to make you better," Patricia snapped, "to make you worthy of my son." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I pulled my hand away, feeling as if I'd been slapped. Simon stepped forward, his face a mix of shock and anger. "Mom, how could you say that?" But Patricia wasn't finished. She turned to Simon, her eyes blazing. "If she won't take care of me, then you'll have to choose, Simon. It's her or me." I looked between them, this mother and son who had taken so much from me already. In that moment, I realized I was at a crossroads. The decision I made now would shape the rest of my life. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and prepared to fight for my future. I stormed out of Patricia's hospital room, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Simon followed close behind, calling my name, but I couldn't bear to look at him. I made it to the parking lot before he caught up, grabbing my arm. "Caroline, please wait," he pleaded, his voice desperate. I whirled around, yanking my arm free. "Wait for what, Simon? For you to choose between your mother and your wife? For you to ask me once again to give up everything I've worked for?" Simon's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. Mom needs care, and we can't afford a nurse." "Because you gambled away our savings," I snapped, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. He flinched as if I'd struck him. "I know I messed up, but Caroline, she's my mother. I can't abandon her." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. "And what about me, Simon? What about our life together? Am I supposed to put everything on hold indefinitely?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Linda. "Caroline, where are you? The hospital board meeting is about to start. They're announcing the new head nurse position." My heart sank. In all the chaos, I'd completely forgotten about the meeting, the chance I'd been working towards for years. "I'll be right there," I said, hanging up and turning back to Simon. "I have to go." His eyes widened in panic. "But what about Mom? What are we going to do?" I shook my head, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "I don't know, Simon. I need some time to think." I left him standing there, looking lost and broken, as I rushed back into the hospital. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: guilt, anger, frustration, and an overwhelming sense of being torn in two. The board meeting was already in progress when I slipped in, taking a seat next to Linda. She shot me a concerned look, but I waved her off, focusing on the hospital administrator at the front of the room. "After careful consideration," he was saying, "we've decided to offer the position of head nurse, too." My heart pounded in my ears. This was it. The moment that could change everything. Caroline Mitchell. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Linda squeezed my arm, beaming, as congratulations erupted around me. I should have been elated, but all I felt was a crushing sense of dread. As the meeting adjourned, my phone buzzed again. "Simon. Caroline, please come back. Mom's asking for you. She says she's sorry." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. On one side, the career I'd worked so hard for, the chance to make a real difference. On the other, my family, broken and dysfunctional as it was. Linda touched my shoulder gently. "Caroline, are you okay?" I looked at her, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "I don't know what to do, Linda. I've just been offered my dream job, but Simon, he wants me to quit, to take care of his mother full-time." Linda's eyes widened in disbelief. "He can't be serious? After everything you've been through?" "He is," I whispered, "and I don't know if our marriage can survive if I say no." Linda took my hands in hers, her gaze steady and compassionate. "Caroline, listen to me. You are an incredible nurse and an amazing woman. You've supported Simon through thick and thin, but at some point you have to put yourself first. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Put myself first. When was the last time I'd done that? As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. Simon's desperate plea glowed on the screen. Caroline, please. I need you. We need you. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of the decision before me. Stay and accept the position I dreamed of, or go back to Simon and Patricia, sacrificing my career for a family that had taken me for granted for so long. In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice, one that would change the course of my life forever. I stood in our living room, my hands trembling as I clutched the envelope containing my new contract. Head nurse. The position I dreamed of for years, and yet here I was, torn between my career and the remnants of my crumbling marriage. Simon paced back and forth, his face a mask of desperation. Caroline, please, you have to understand. Mom needs us. She has no one else. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation I knew would change everything. And what about what I need, Simon? What about the life we planned together? He stopped pacing, his eyes meeting mine. There was a hardness there I'd never seen before. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Sacrifices? I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. I've been making sacrifices since the day you quit your job to chase your dreams, dreams that left us bankrupt and broken. Simon flinched as if I'd struck him. That's not fair. I was trying to build a better life for us. And how did that work out? I shot back, years of pent-up frustration boiling over. Now you want me to give up everything I've worked for to take care of your mother, a woman who's never shown me an ounce of respect? She's trying, Caroline. She apologized, remember? I laughed bitterly. One apology doesn't erase years of criticism and contempt. Simon's face hardened. So that's it? You're choosing your job over your family? Family? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. What family, Simon? The one where I give and give until there's nothing left of me? The one where my dreams don't matter as long as you and your mother are taken care of? He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. I never thought you could be so selfish. Something snapped inside me. Selfish? I've supported you through everything, Simon. I stood by you when you quit your job. I worked double shifts to keep us afloat while you chased your dreams. I've given everything to this marriage, and it's still not enough for you. Simon's eyes flashed with anger. If that's how you feel, maybe we should just end this now. The room fell silent, his words hanging in the air between us. I felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. What are you saying? I whispered, hardly daring to breathe. Simon's jaw clenched. I'm saying you have a choice to make, Caroline. Take care of my mother, or we get a divorce. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I stared at him, this man I'd loved since high school, now a stranger demanding I choose between my self-respect and our marriage. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a clarity I'd been lacking for years. Without a word, I walked to the desk and pulled out a folder. Inside were the divorce papers I'd had drawn up months ago, but never had the courage to use. Simon's eyes widened as I placed them on the coffee table between us. Caroline, what are you doing? My hand shook as I picked up a pen, but my voice was steady. I'm making a choice, Simon. The choice you forced me to make. Wait, he said, panic creeping into his voice. Let's talk about this. We can figure something out. But I was beyond talking. Years of suppressed anger, resentment, and disappointment fueled my actions as I signed my name on the dotted line. Simon lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers away, but I held firm. Caroline, stop! You can't do this! I looked up at him, tears streaming down my face, but resolve burning in my chest. I can, and I am. I choose me, Simon. For once in my life, I choose me. As I walked out the door, leaving Simon staring at the signed divorce papers, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The pounding on my apartment door jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m. My heart raced as I stumbled to the door, already knowing who it was. Caroline, open up, please! Simon's voice was ragged, desperate. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. It had been 3 days since I'd walked out, 3 days of silence broken only by a barrage of increasingly frantic voicemails and texts. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Simon stood there, disheveled and wild-eyed. The The scent of alcohol wafted off him. "What are you doing here, Simon?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He pushed past me into the apartment. "We need to talk. You can't do this, Caroline. You can't throw away our marriage like this." I closed the door, steeling myself. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm saving myself." Simon ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. "I'll do anything. I'll get a job. I'll find a way to take care of Mom without you quitting. Just, please, don't leave me." The desperation in his voice tugged at my heart, but I forced myself to remember why I'd left. "It's too late for that, Simon. You made your choice when you gave me that ultimatum." He whirled on me, eyes blazing. "And you made yours when you signed those papers. How could you do that? 20 years together, and you throw it all away in an instant?" Anger flared within me. "An instant? Is that what you think this was? Simon, I've been dying inside for years, watching you chase your dreams while mine withered away. I've given everything to you and your mother, and it's never been enough." "That's not true," he protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I countered. "When was the last time you asked about my dreams? When was the last time you stood up to your mother when she belittled me?" Simon's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We have to fix this." I shook my head, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "No, Simon, we can't. Some things once broken can't be put back together." He stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "Caroline, I love you. Doesn't that count for anything?" For a moment I wavered. The weight of our shared history pressed down on me. High school sweethearts, the early struggles of our marriage, the dreams we'd once shared. But then I remembered the loneliness, the constant sacrifices, the feeling of being slowly erased. "Love isn't enough," I said softly. "Not when it comes at the cost of my self-respect, my dreams, my very identity." Simon's face hardened. "So that's it? You're really choosing your job over our family?" "I'm choosing myself," I replied, my voice growing stronger. "For the first time in years, I'm putting myself first." He laughed bitterly. "And what about Mom? Are you just going to abandon her?" I felt a flash of guilt, quickly replaced by resolve. "Patricia has other options. There are care facilities, home health aides. It's not my responsibility to give up my life for her." "She'll never forgive you for this," Simon spat. "I can live with that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Simon's shoulders sagged, defeat written in every line of his body. "I don't know how to live without you, Caroline." For a moment, I saw the boy I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But he wasn't that boy anymore, and I wasn't that girl. "You'll learn," I said gently. "We both will." He looked at me one last time, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, desperation, and something that might have been respect. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door. As it closed behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. 6 months after signing the divorce papers, I found myself sitting in a quaint coffee shop, my hands wrapped around a steaming latte. The aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air, a comforting contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling inside me. "Caroline?" A familiar voice called out. I looked up to see Mark, Simon's former colleague, approaching my table. "Mark, hi," I said, gesturing for him to join me. "It's been a while." He sat down, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "I heard about you and Simon. I'm sorry things didn't work out." I nodded, surprised to find that the pain I'd expected to feel had dulled to a distant ache. "Thank you. It's been an adjustment." Mark hesitated, then leaned in. "Listen, Caroline, there's something you should know about Simon, something I probably should have told you years ago." My heart quickened. "What is it?" "Simon was never as competent as he made himself out to be," Mark said, his voice low. "At work, he was always taking credit for other people's ideas, schmoozing with the bosses while others did the heavy lifting. When he left to start his own business, we all knew it was doomed to fail." I sat back, stunned, but he always seemed so confident, so sure of himself. Mark shook his head. It was all a facade. He was terrified of failure, of not living up to everyone's expectations. I think that's why he clung to you so tightly. You were his safety net. As Mark's words sank in, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief wash over me. Anger at the years I'd spent propping up Simon's fragile ego, and relief that I'd finally broken free. Thank you for telling me this, Mark, I said, my voice steady. It helps. After Mark left, I sat there, lost in thought. Memories flooded back. Simon's grandiose plans, his reluctance to face reality, his constant need for validation. How had I not seen it before? My phone buzzed, jolting me back to the present. It was Linda. Turn on the news. Channel 5. Confused, I pulled out my tablet and loaded the local news stream. My jaw dropped as I saw the headline, "Local businessman arrested for fraud." There, being led away in handcuffs, was Simon. The reporter's voice filled in the details. A Ponzi scheme, investors defrauded of millions, years of financial manipulation finally exposed. I sat there, frozen, as the full impact of what I'd escaped hit me. If I'd stayed, if I'd given in to Simon's demands, I would have been dragged down with him. My phone rang again. This time, it was Patricia. "Caroline," her voice was uncharacteristically subdued. I owe you an apology." I held my breath, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "I saw the news," she continued. "All these years, I thought Simon could do no wrong, and I blamed you for not supporting him enough. But now I see, you were the strong one. You saw what I couldn't or wouldn't see." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you, Patricia. That means a lot." After we hung up, I sat there, overwhelmed by the day's revelations. The Caroline of 6 months ago would have been devastated, would have blamed herself for not seeing through Simon's lies. But I wasn't that Caroline anymore. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out of the coffee shop. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. As I walked towards my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Yes, I'd lost my marriage. Yes, I'd been deceived. But I'd also found something invaluable, myself. I thought about the head nurse position I'd accepted, the new apartment I'd made my own, the friendships I'd rekindled. For the first time in years, I was living life on my own terms. As I drove home, I realized that this wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning, a chance to rewrite my story, to chase my own dreams, to love myself as fiercely as I'd once loved Simon. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. Because now I knew the truth. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, and the best chapters of my life were yet to be written. The letter trembled in my hands, its crisp edges threatening to slice through my carefully constructed world. I read the words again, my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged bird. "Dearest Paige, not all is as it seems in your perfect life. Beware the viper in your nest." No signature. No return address, just a cryptic warning that sent chills down my spine. "Honey, what's that?" Anthony's voice startled me, and I quickly folded the letter, shoving it into my pocket. "Oh, nothing. Just some junk mail," I lied, forcing a smile. "Ready for dinner?" Anthony's warm brown eyes crinkled as he grinned. "Always. But are you sure you're okay? You look a bit pale." I waved off his concern, determined not to let this mysterious message ruin our evening. "I'm fine, really. Just hungry. Let's go." As we walked to our favorite Italian restaurant, my mind raced. Who could have sent that letter? And what did it mean? I'd worked hard to build my life with Anthony, a successful career, a loving marriage. Was someone trying to destroy that? The hostess greeted us with a bright smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, your usual table is ready." We settled into our seats, and I tried to push the letter from my thoughts. Anthony reached across the table, taking my hand. "So how was your day, sweetheart?" I hesitated, then decided to stick as close to the truth as possible. "It was interesting. I got a strange piece of mail today." Anthony's eyebrows furrowed. "Strange how?" Before I could answer, our waiter appeared. "Good evening, folks. Can I start you off with some drinks?" We placed our orders, and I used the interruption to gather my thoughts. When the waiter left, Anthony leaned in, his voice low. "Paige, what's going on? You're not yourself tonight." I sighed, reaching into my pocket. "I received this today." I handed him the letter, watching his face as he read it. His eyes widened, then narrowed. "What the hell? Who would send something like this?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's got me rattled. Do you think, could it be your mother?" Anthony's jaw clenched. "Violet? Why would you think that?" I shrugged, feeling guilty for even suggesting it. "She's never liked me, Anthony. You know that." He shook his head firmly. "No, she wouldn't do something like this. It's probably just some sick joke." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. Our food arrived, and we ate in tense silence, the letter casting a shadow over our usual easy companionship. As we finished our meal, Anthony's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up at me with an odd expression. "It's my grandmother. She wants us to come for a family gathering next month." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Your grandmother? Gabrielle?" He nodded. "Yeah, she says it's been too long since we've all been together. What do you think?" My mind raced. Gabrielle had always been kind to me, unlike Violet. But the thought of facing Anthony's entire family with this mysterious threat hanging over my head made my stomach churn. I don't know, Anthony, with work and everything." He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Come on, Paige, it might be good for us. Get away from the city, clear our heads, and maybe we can figure out what's going on with this letter." I bit my lip, torn between my desire to avoid conflict and my need to uncover the truth. Finally, I nodded. "Okay, let's do it." As we left the restaurant, my phone pinged with a new email. I opened it, then stopped dead in my tracks, my blood running cold. "Anthony," I whispered, showing him the screen. "Look." There, in stark black and white, was a photo of us at dinner taken just minutes ago. Below it, the same chilling message: "Beware the viper in your nest." Anthony's face paled. "We need to call the police." I nodded, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. As we waited for the officers to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change dramatically. The viper, whoever they were, was closer than we thought, and they were watching our every move. The police report sat on our coffee table, a stark reminder of the unsettling events from last week. I stared at it, my mind racing with unanswered questions. Who was watching us? And why? Anthony's voice broke through my thoughts. "Paige, honey, did you hear me?" I blinked, focusing on his concerned face. "Sorry, what?" He sighed, sitting next to me on the couch. I said, "Grandma Gabrielle called again. She's really hoping we'll come to the family gathering next month." My stomach twisted. With everything that had happened, I'd almost forgotten about the invitation. "I don't know, Anthony. Maybe we should stay home, figure out what's going on with these threats." He took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I understand you're scared, but maybe getting away is exactly what we need. The police said they'd keep investigating. And who knows, being around family might help us feel safer." I snorted. "Safer? With your mother there?" Anthony's face fell, and I immediately regretted my words. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "No, you're right," he said quietly. "Things have always been tense between you and Mom. But Paige, she's still family, and Grandma Gabrielle adores you. It might be good for all of us to spend some time together." I bit my lip, torn between my instinct to hide away and the nagging feeling that facing Anthony's family might lead to some answers. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's do it." Anthony's face lit up, and he pulled me into a tight hug. "It'll be great, you'll see." As he went to call his grandmother, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and preparation. No more threatening messages arrived, but the memory of that photo kept me looking over my shoulder. Finally, the day of our departure arrived. As we loaded our bags into the car, I noticed a sleek black sedan parked across the street. My heart raced. "Anthony?" I whispered, nodding towards the car. He frowned. "I've never seen that before. You think it's connected to the threats?" Before I could answer, the car's engine roared to life and it sped away. We exchanged worried glances but said nothing as we got into our own vehicle. The drive to Anthony's family home was tense, filled with stilted conversation and long silences. As we pulled into the long, tree-lined driveway, I felt my anxiety spike. Gabrielle was waiting on the porch, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. She waved enthusiastically as we parked. "My dears, you're here at last!" Anthony helped me out of the car, squeezing my hand reassuringly. We walked up to greet Gabrielle, who enveloped us both in a warm hug. "Oh, how I've missed you both," she said, her eyes twinkling. Come in. Everyone's so excited to see you." As we entered the house, I caught sight of Violet standing in the hallway. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes cold as they swept over me. "Anthony," she said warmly, embracing her son. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned to me. "Paige, how nice to see you." I forced a smile. "Hello, Violet. Thank you for having us." An awkward silence fell, broken only when William, Anthony's father, appeared from the living room. There you are, he boomed, clapping Anthony on the back. Good to see you, son. And Paige, welcome back. As the family exchanged greetings, I noticed Violet's eyes narrow, her gaze fixed on something behind me. I turned to see what had caught her attention and froze. There, sitting on an antique side table, was a familiar-looking envelope. My heart pounded as I approached it, my hand shaking as I picked it up. What's that, dear? Gabrielle asked, her voice laced with curiosity. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, already knowing what I would find inside. As I unfolded the paper, the now familiar words leapt out at me. Beware the viper in your nest. I looked up, meeting Violet's icy stare. In that moment, I knew with chilling certainty that our family gathering was about to become a battlefield, and I was woefully unprepared for the war ahead. The envelope crinkled in my grip as I stared at Violet, my heart pounding. Her icy gaze never wavered, and I felt a chill run down my spine. What's that, dear? Gabrielle's voice broke the tension. I quickly folded the note and shoved it into my pocket. Nothing important, I lied, forcing a smile. Just some old mail. Anthony's hand on my back steadied me. Let's get settled in, shall we? He suggested, sensing the unease in the air. As we carried our bags upstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling of Violet's eyes boring into my back. Once in our room, I turned to Anthony. Did you see that? The envelope? He nodded, his brow furrowed. I did. You don't think... I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted, but I'm sure it wasn't there when we arrived. A soft knock interrupted us. Gabrielle poked her head in, smiling warmly. Everything all right in here? I've made some lemonade if you'd like to join us on the porch. We followed her downstairs, the tension from earlier momentarily forgotten in the face of her kindness. As we stepped onto the porch, I noticed my favorite handbag was missing from where I'd left it. Has anyone seen my purse? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Violet looked up from her seat, her expression unreadable. Oh, I moved it inside. Wouldn't want anything to happen to it out here. I thanked her, but something in her tone made me uneasy. When I retrieved the bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been rifled through. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself constantly on edge. Every time Violet entered a room, the air seemed to crackle with tension. Even William, usually so easygoing, seemed affected by the atmosphere. That evening, as we prepared for dinner, I noticed my toiletry bag had been moved. Items were out of place, and my favorite perfume was missing. Anthony, I called, my voice shaking. Something's not right here. He came to my side, his face etched with concern. What is it? I explained about the misplaced items, the missing perfume. His frown deepened. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Let's talk to Mom about it after dinner. But dinner was a tense affair. Violet dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories of Anthony's childhood, stories that pointedly excluded me. I pushed my food around my plate, appetite gone. So, Paige, Violet said suddenly, her voice syrupy sweet. How's that big project of yours going? The one that's keeping you so busy you can hardly visit family? I felt my cheeks burn. It's going well, thank you. She hummed, taking a sip of wine. I do hope it's worth all the sacrifices you're making. Family should always come first, don't you think? Before I could respond, Gabrielle intervened. Now, Violet, I'm sure Paige is doing her best to balance everything. It's not easy being a modern working woman. Violet's lips thinned, but she said nothing more. The rest of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence. Later that night, as Anthony and I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake my unease. I think we should leave, I whispered. Something's not right here. He sighed, pulling me close. Let's give it one more day, okay? Maybe things will improve. I nodded reluctantly, but sleep eluded me. In the early hours of the morning, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed the study, I heard hushed voices. Curious, I inched closer to the door. Can't keep this up, Violet, I heard Gabrielle say. It's not right. I'm doing what's best for this family, Violet hissed back. That woman is poison. She'll destroy everything if we let her. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back, knocking over a vase. The crash echoed through the silent house. The study door flew open, and I found myself face to face with Violet and Gabrielle. Violet's eyes narrowed dangerously. Well, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Eavesdropping, are we? I always knew you couldn't be trusted. As I stood there, frozen in shock, I realized that the viper in the nest was closer than I'd ever imagined. and she was poised to strike. My heart thundered in my chest as I faced Violet and Gabrielle. The shattered vase lay at my feet, a perfect metaphor for the fragile piece that had just been destroyed. I wasn't eavesdropping, I stammered, trying to regain my composure. I just came down for some water. Violet's eyes narrowed. Of course you did, she sneered. Always the innocent one, aren't you, Paige? Gabrielle placed a restraining hand on Violet's arm. Now let's all calm down. It's late, and tempers are frayed. Why don't we discuss this in the morning? Before anyone could respond, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Anthony appeared, his hair mussed from sleep. What's going on? I heard a crash. His eyes darted between me, his mother, and his grandmother, taking in the tension. Paige? Mom? What happened? I opened my mouth to explain, but Violet beat me to it. Your wife was caught snooping, dear. It seems she can't help but stick her nose where it doesn't belong. Anthony's brow furrowed. Paige, is that true? I felt a surge of anger. No, it's not. I came down for water and overheard them talking. Violet was saying I'm poison to this family. The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony looked stunned, his gaze shifting between his mother and me. Violet's face hardened. You're twisting my words. I was merely expressing concern about how your career is affecting our family dynamics. That's not what I heard, I retorted, my voice shaking. You said I'd destroy everything if you let me. Anthony stepped between us, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. Stop, both of you. This isn't helping anything. Gabrielle cleared her throat. Perhaps we should all get some rest. We can discuss this calmly in the morning. As we trudged back upstairs, the tension was palpable. In our room, Anthony turned to me, his eyes searching my face. Paige, what's really going on? I sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. I don't know, Anthony. Ever since we got here, strange things have been happening. My things have been moved, that threatening note appeared, and now this. I feel like I'm losing my mind. He sat beside me, taking my hand. We'll figure this out, I promise. But you have to admit, sneaking around in the middle of the night doesn't look good. I pulled away, stung. You don't believe me, do you? You think I'm making this up? No, that's not what I'm saying, he backpedaled. I just think there might be a reasonable explanation for all of this. I stood up, pacing the room. A reasonable explanation? Anthony, your mother hates me. She always has, and now she's trying to drive a wedge between us. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. Paige, please, she's my mother. I can't believe she'd do something like that. Then what am I supposed to think? I cried, tears threatening to spill. Am I imagining all of this? Anthony stood, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I think, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I need to leave. His face fell. Leave, Paige, no. We can work this out. I shook my head, grabbing my suitcase. I can't stay here, Anthony. Not when I feel like I'm going crazy. Not when you don't believe me. As I started throwing clothes into the bag, Anthony watched helplessly. Where will you go? He asked softly. I don't know, I admitted, but I need space to think, to figure out what's really going on here. Just then, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. Gabrielle's voice came through. Paige, Anthony, may I come in? There's something you both need to know. I exchanged a glance with Anthony, my hand frozen over my half-packed suitcase. Whatever Gabrielle had to say, I knew it would change everything. With a deep breath, I moved to open the door, bracing myself for what was to come. Gabrielle's revelation left Anthony and me reeling. She confessed to witnessing Violet's increasingly erratic behavior, including tampering with my belongings. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air as she left us to process the information. I can't believe this, Anthony muttered, pacing our room. My own mother. I sat on the bed, my half-packed suitcase forgotten. What are we going to do? Before Anthony could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. It's work. I have to take this. As he stepped out to answer the call, I felt a sudden urge to confront Violet. With Anthony distracted, I slipped out of our room and made my way downstairs. The house was quiet, but a sliver of light under Violet's study door caught my attention. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. Come in, Violet's voice called out, sounding surprisingly calm. I entered, my heart pounding. Violet sat behind her desk, looking every bit the matriarch she aspired to be. Ah, Paige, I was wondering when you'd come to see me. Why are you doing this? I demanded, my voice shaking. Why do you hate me so much? Violet's eyes narrowed. Hate is such a strong word, dear. I'm merely protecting my family. By sabotaging my marriage, my career? She stood, circling the desk. You don't understand what it means to be part of this family. Your career, your ambitions, they're a distraction. Anthony needs a wife who will support him, not compete with him. I felt my anger rising. That's not your decision to make. Anthony loves me for who I am. Does he? Violet smirked. Then why hasn't he confronted me about my erratic behavior? Why is he always caught in the middle, unable to choose a side? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Before I could respond, the study door burst open. Anthony stood there, his face ashen. Paige, he said, his voice hollow. We need to talk. Now. I followed him back to our room, dread building in my stomach. Once inside, he turned to me, his eyes filled with hurt and confusion. That was my boss, he said. Apparently someone sent him emails from my account, bad-mouthing clients and revealing confidential information. I've been suspended pending an investigation. I gasped. Anthony, you know I would never. The emails were sent from our home network, Paige. He cut me off. While I was at work. You're the only one who has access to my computer at home. The implications of his words hit me like a tidal wave. You think I did this? Anthony, no, it must have been your mother. She's trying to drive us apart. He shook his head, looking torn. I don't know what to think anymore. This is my career we're talking about. My entire future could be ruined. Tears stung my eyes. I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. Please, you have to believe me. Anthony sank onto the bed, head in his hands. I want to, Paige. But the evidence? I just don't know. In that moment, I realized the true extent of Violet's manipulation. She hadn't just been trying to drive a wedge between us. She was systematically destroying everything I held dear. I can't stay here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Not when you don't trust me. Anthony looked up, his eyes pleading. Paige, wait, but I was already grabbing my suitcase. As I headed for the door, I turned back one last time. I love you, Anthony, but I won't let your mother destroy me. When you're ready to see the truth, you know where to find me. With those words, I walked out, leaving behind the man I loved and the family that had become a battlefield. As I drove away from the house, tears streaming down my face, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The viper had struck, and now it was up to me to find a way to neutralize its venom, before it was too late. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking as I read the email from my boss. Paige, we need to talk. Urgent matter concerning your position. Come to the office immediately. My heart raced as I drove to work, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What could be so urgent? As I walked into the office, the tension was palpable. Colleagues averted their eyes, whispers following me down the hallway. My boss, Sarah, greeted me with a grim expression. Paige, please sit down. I sank into the chair, bracing myself. What's going on, Sarah? She sighed heavily. There's no easy way to say this. We've received multiple reports about your mother's criminal history, embezzlement, fraud. It's all over the office gossip mill. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? That's impossible. My mother's never been involved in anything illegal. Sarah slid a folder across the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, court documents, all fabricated, all painting my mother as a career criminal. This has to be a mistake, I stammered. Someone set this up. Paige, I want to believe you, Sarah said, her voice softening. But these documents look legitimate, and given your access to sensitive financial information. The implication hit me like a ton of bricks. You think I'm involved? Sarah, I swear, none of this is true. She held up a hand. We have to investigate. In the meantime, I'm afraid we'll have to suspend you. I left the office in a daze, my career hanging by a thread. As I sat in my car, trying to process what had just happened, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. How does it feel to lose everything? Violet. It had to be her. Rage boiled inside me as I realized the extent of her machinations. She hadn't just targeted my marriage, she was systematically destroying every aspect of my life. Desperate for allies, I called the one person I hoped I could still trust. Gabrielle? It's Paige. I need your help. An hour later, I sat in Gabrielle's cozy living room, pouring out the whole sordid tale. She listened intently, her face growing more troubled with each revelation. Oh, my dear, she said when I finished. I had no idea Violet had gone to such lengths. This ends now. She stood, a fire in her eyes I'd never seen before. It's time I told you the whole truth about Violet. What Gabrielle revealed next shook me to my core. Violet's jealousy and manipulation hadn't started with me. It was a pattern that stretched back decades, affecting every relationship in the family. She nearly destroyed William and me when we first married, Gabrielle confessed. I've tried to protect her, to help her change, but this has gone too far. As we talked, piecing together Violet's web of lies, my phone rang. It was Anthony. "Paige," his voice was urgent. "Where are you? You need to come home right away. Mom's gone too far this time." I exchanged a glance with Gabrielle. "What happened?" She tried to access your work accounts. Dad caught her. "It's a mess, Paige. Please come back. I'm so sorry I ever doubted you." Relief flooded through me at his words, quickly followed by determination. "I'm on my way. And Anthony? I'm bringing reinforcements." As Gabrielle and I drove back to the family home, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. This was it, the final confrontation. Everything I had worked for, everything I loved, hung in the balance. Pulling up to the house, I saw Anthony waiting on the porch, his face etched with worry and regret. Behind him, I could hear Violet's voice, shrill and defensive. Gabrielle squeezed my hand. "Are you ready, dear?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. As ready as I'll ever be. Together, we walked towards the house, towards the woman who had nearly destroyed everything I held dear. It was time to face the viper in her nest, once and for all. As Gabrielle and I entered the house, the tension was palpable. Anthony rushed to my side, his eyes filled with remorse. "Paige, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you from the start." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his support, but focused on the task at hand. In the living room, Violet stood defiantly, her face flushed with anger. William sat quietly in the corner, looking defeated. Well, well," Violet sneered. "The prodigal daughter-in-law returns. Come to cause more trouble?" Gabrielle stepped forward, her voice steady. "That's enough, Violet. It's time we all had a talk." For the next hour, the truth came pouring out. Gabrielle revealed Violet's history of manipulation, from her attempts to sabotage Gabrielle's marriage to William, to her constant interference in Anthony's life. With each revelation, Violet's facade cracked a little more. "You don't understand," Violet cried, her voice shrill. "I was protecting this family. Paige is tearing us apart with her career and her modern ideas." I couldn't stay silent any longer. "No, Violet, you're the one tearing this family apart. You've lied, manipulated, and nearly destroyed my career and my marriage. Why? Because you can't stand the idea of your son being happy with someone you can't control?" Violet's eyes flashed dangerously. "You ungrateful little—" She lunged forward, but Anthony intercepted her. "Mom, stop!" he shouted, holding her back. "This has to end. Now." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. William answered it, returning with a grim-faced police officer. "Mrs. Violet Hartley?" the officer asked. "We have some questions about recent unauthorized access to corporate accounts and spreading of false information." Violet's face drained of color. She turned to William, her voice suddenly small. "You called the police on me?" William stood tall for the first time since we'd arrived. "It was the right thing to do, V. This has gone too far." As the officer began reading Violet her rights, she broke down completely. "I did it all for you," she wailed, looking at Anthony. "Can't you see? She'll never love you like I do." Anthony's face was a mask of pain and resolve. "No, Mom. This isn't love. It's control. And it stops now." As Violet was led away, still shouting and crying, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The threat was over, but at what cost? Gabrielle gathered us all in the living room, her voice gentle but firm. "We have a lot of healing to do as a family, but first, we need to make things right." Over the next few hours, we made calls, to my workplace, to Anthony's boss, to friends and family who had been affected by Violet's lies. It was exhausting, but with each call, I felt a little of the weight lift from my shoulders. As night fell, Anthony and I found ourselves alone on the porch swing. He took my hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Paige, I don't know if I can ever make up for doubting you, but I promise, from this moment on you have my complete trust and support, always." I leaned into him, tears stinging my eyes. "We both made mistakes, Anthony, but we're stronger for having gone through this. Together." As we sat there, watching the stars come out, I realized that this wasn't just an end to Violet's machinations. It was a new beginning for all of us. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There was still so much to repair, so many wounds to heal. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I had hope. The viper had been exposed, her venom neutralized. Now it was time to rebuild the nest, stronger, more resilient, and filled with the love and trust that Violet had tried so hard to destroy. 6 months after the confrontation, I stood nervously in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress. Today was the day Violet would be released from her court-mandated therapy program, and we were all gathering at Gabrielle's house for a family dinner. Anthony appeared behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You ready for this?" I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The drive to Gabrielle's was quiet, both of us lost in thought. As we pulled up, I saw William helping Violet out of their car. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Gabrielle greeted us at the door with warm hugs. "Come in, dears. Everyone's here." The atmosphere in the living room was tense but not hostile. Violet sat in an armchair, her eyes downcast. When she looked up and saw me, I braced myself for the usual coldness. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes: remorse. "Paige," she said softly, I owe you an apology. To all of you," she added, looking around the room. For the next hour, Violet spoke openly about her actions, her fears, and what she'd learned in therapy. She talked about her own difficult relationship with her mother, her fear of losing Anthony, and how she'd let those fears twist into something toxic. "I know I can never fully make up for what I've done," she said, her voice breaking, "but I hope in time you can all forgive me." The room was silent for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, William stood up and went to his wife's side. "We've all made mistakes, Vi, but we're family. We'll get through this together." Anthony squeezed my hand, silently asking for my opinion. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Mom," Anthony said, "what you did was wrong. It hurt us all deeply, but we're willing to try if you are. It won't be easy, but we want to move forward as a family." Violet's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise, I'll do better." As the evening progressed, I felt the tension in the room slowly dissipate. We shared a meal, talked about neutral topics, and even managed a few laughs. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. After dessert, Anthony and I exchanged a glance. It was time. "Everyone," I said, standing up, "Anthony and I have an announcement to make." All eyes turned to us, half curious. Anthony stood beside me, his arm around my waist. "We're pregnant," he said, his voice filled with joy. "You're all going to be grandparents and great-grandparents." The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. Gabrielle rushed to hug us, tears in her eyes. William beamed with pride. And Violet sat frozen, her face unreadable. For a moment, I feared we'd made a mistake in sharing our news. Then, slowly, Violet stood and approached us. She looked at me, then at Anthony, then back to me. "A baby," she said softly. Then, to my utter amazement, she smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Oh, my dears, what wonderful news." She hesitated, then opened her arms. "May I?" I nodded, and she enveloped me in a gentle hug. As she pulled away, she whispered, "Thank you for giving our family a second chance. I promise to be the grandmother this child deserves." As we all gathered around, talking excitedly about the future, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past few months had been the hardest of my life, but they'd also taught me the true meaning of family, forgiveness, and resilience. Looking around at the smiling faces, Anthony's love, Gabrielle's wisdom, William's quiet strength, and even Violet's newfound warmth, I realized that we had all emerged stronger from this ordeal. The viper's venom had been painful, but it hadn't destroyed us. Instead, it had forged us into something unbreakable. As I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling the first flutter of new life, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family. The scent of betrayal hung in the air, thick as the summer humidity. I stood frozen, my hand clutching the steering wheel, as I watched my husband Max step out of the unfamiliar red sedan. A woman with long, dark hair emerged from the passenger side, her laughter carrying across the parking lot. "This can't be happening," I whispered to myself, my heart pounding in my chest. Max leaned in, kissing the woman on the cheek before they parted ways. I ducked down in my seat, praying he wouldn't notice me as he walked towards his own car. As soon as Max drove away, I started my engine and followed the red sedan. My mind raced with questions. each one more painful than the last. Who was she? How long had this been going on? I trailed the car to a modest apartment complex across town. The woman, still oblivious to my presence, disappeared inside. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed my best friend, Alice. Emma, what's wrong? Alice's concerned voice came through the speaker. I think Max is cheating on me, I blurted out, my voice cracking. Oh, honey, where are you? I gave her the address, and within minutes, Alice's familiar blue hatchback pulled up beside me. Get in, she said, her face a mask of determination. You shouldn't be alone right now. As we drove back to my house, I recounted what I'd seen. Alice listened intently, her grip on the steering wheel tightening with each detail. That bastard, she muttered. Emma, you need to confront him. I shook my head. I can't. What if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation? Alice pulled into my driveway and turned to face me. Sweetie, you saw what you saw. Don't let him gaslight you. Just then, Max's car turned onto our street. Alice squeezed my hand. You've got this. Call me later, okay? I nodded, climbing out of her car just as Max pulled up. He looked surprised to see me home early. Hey, Em, everything okay? He asked, his brow furrowed in what seemed like genuine concern. I took a deep breath. We need to talk, Max. Inside, I paced the living room, while Max sat on the couch, watching me with growing unease. Where were you this afternoon? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. At work, like always. Why? The lie hit me like a physical blow. Don't. I saw you, Max, with her. His face paled. Emma, I can explain. Explain what? I snapped. How you were kissing another woman? How you've been lying to me? Max stood up, reaching for me. It's not what you think. Carol's just a friend. Carol? I repeated, the name tasting bitter on my tongue. So she has a name. Emma, please, let me explain. The doorbell interrupted us. I moved to answer it, grateful for the distraction. As I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a woman I'd never seen before. She was older, probably in her late 50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through me. Mrs. Reynolds? She asked. I nodded, confused. I'm Daisy Reynolds, Max's mother, she said, her voice clipped. I think it's time we had a little chat about my son. I glanced back at Max, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. As I stepped aside to let Daisy in, I realized that my world was about to be turned upside down even more than I'd thought possible. The tension in the room was palpable as Daisy strode in, her eyes darting between Max and me. Whatever she had come to say, I had a feeling it would change everything. And as I closed the door behind her, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that my once blissful marriage was about to crumble before my eyes. The days following Daisy's unexpected visit were a blur of tension and unspoken accusations. Max had managed to deflect his mother's concerns, but her words lingered in the air like a toxic fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than I knew. One morning, as I was getting ready for my shift at the hospital, I noticed Max's phone buzzing on the nightstand. He was in the shower, and curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, my heart racing as I saw the name Carol flash across the screen. Before I could think twice, I unlocked his phone. He'd never changed the passcode from my birthday. What I saw made my blood run cold. Dozens of messages, each more intimate than the last, scrolled before my eyes. I miss you. One read, can't wait to see you again, said another. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back, my hands shaking. Everything okay, Em? Max asked as he came out, towel around his waist. I forced a smile. Fine, just running late. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying those messages, imagining Max with Carol. During my lunch break, I called Alice. I need your help, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What's wrong? Alice's concern was palpable. I saw messages on Max's phone. From her. From Carol. Alice's sharp intake of breath told me everything. Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. What do I do, Alice? I can't confront him without admitting I snooped. You need proof, Alice said firmly. Concrete evidence. Can you check his call logs? That night, I waited until Max was asleep before carefully examining his phone again. The call logs were a damning testament to his betrayal. Daily calls to Carol, often lasting hours. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own home. I noted Max's late nights at the office, his sudden work trips, the way he guarded his phone. Each discovery was a knife to my heart, but I needed to be sure. Then came the night that changed everything. Max said he had a late meeting, but something in his voice made me suspicious. I followed him, my heart pounding as I trailed his car across town. He pulled up to a small Italian restaurant, and there she was, Carol, waiting outside. I watched as they embraced, kissed, and went inside, oblivious to my presence. Through the window, I could see them laughing, holding hands across the table. The intimacy of it all made me sick to my stomach. I took out my phone with trembling hands and snapped a few pictures, tears blurring my vision. As I sat in my car staring at the evidence of my husband's betrayal, my phone buzzed. It was Alice. "Emma, where are you? I stopped by your house and you weren't there." I couldn't hold back the sobs any longer. "He's with her, Alice. I'm watching them right now." "Oh, honey, stay where you are. I'm coming to get you." Alice arrived within minutes, her face a mask of concern and anger. She climbed into my car, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath, wiping away my tears. "I want to confront him, tonight." Alice nodded, her eyes steely with determination. "Then that's what we'll do. You're not alone in this, Emma." As we drove home, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but now it was mixed with something else. Resolve. We pulled into my driveway just as Max's car turned onto our street. Alice squeezed my hand. "Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who broke your trust." I nodded, stepping out of the car. As Max approached, his face registered surprise, then alarm at the sight of Alice and my tear-stained face. "Emma? What's going on?" he asked, his voice wavering. I met his gaze, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "We need to talk, Max. About Carol." The color drained from his face, and I knew in that moment that everything was about to change. The life I thought I knew was crumbling around me, but as I stood there, with Alice by my side and the truth finally out in the open, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected. Hope. The confrontation with Max left me emotionally drained, but it didn't provide the closure I'd hoped for. He'd apologized, promised to end things with Carol, and begged for another chance. I wanted to believe him, but the trust was shattered. A week later, I found myself sitting in my car, outside Max's office, my heart pounding. He'd told me he was working late, but something in his voice had set off alarm bells. "You don't have to do this." Alice's voice crackled through my phone's speaker. I took a deep breath. "I need to know, Alice. I can't live with the uncertainty anymore." As if on cue, Max emerged from the building. He wasn't alone. Carol was by his side, her hand on his arm. They walked to his car, laughing and talking intimately. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, snapping pictures as they got into Max's car and drove away. I followed at a distance, my mind racing. They pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Hotel downtown. I watched as they walked inside, Max's hand on the small of Carol's back. "Alice," I choked out, "they're at a hotel." "Oh, Emma?" Alice's voice was filled with sympathy and anger. "Do you want me to come get you?" "No," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "I need to see this through." I waited in the lobby, my heart in my throat, for nearly 2 hours. When Max and Carol finally emerged, they were disheveled and giddy, oblivious to my presence. I stepped out from behind a large potted plant, my phone raised. "Smile for the camera, lovebirds." The flash went off, capturing their shocked expressions perfectly. "Emma!" Max's face drained of color. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, my voice ice-cold. "But I think the answer's pretty obvious, isn't it?" Carol had the decency to look ashamed, but Max's expression quickly morphed from shock to anger. "You followed me," he hissed. "What gives you the right?" "What gives me the right?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "I'm your wife, Max, or have you forgotten that little detail while you've been busy screwing around?" People in the lobby were starting to stare, but I didn't care. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. "I trusted you," I continued, tears streaming down my face. "I believed you when you said you'd end it. How could you do this to me, to us?" Max reached for me, his face a mask of regret. "Emma, please, let's not do this here. We can talk about this at home." I stepped back out of his reach. "There's nothing left to talk about, Max. We're done." I turned to Carol, who looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "He's all yours. I hope you're happy together." As I walked away, Max called after me, but I didn't turn back. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. "Do you need me?" "Yes," I replied, my vision blurry with tears. "Can you meet me at home? I don't think I should be alone right now." By the time I got home, Alice was already there, waiting on my porch with a bottle of wine and a fierce, protective look in her eyes. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug as soon as I stepped out of the car. "I'm so sorry." We sat on the porch swing, passing the bottle back and forth as I recounted what had happened. As I talked, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it was a new feeling: determination. "What are you going to do now?" Alice asked gently. I took a deep breath, looking out at the neighborhood I'd called home for so long. "I'm going to file for divorce," I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "And then I'm going to start over." Alice squeezed my hand. "Whatever you need, I'm here." As we sat there, the sun setting on my old life, I felt a strange mix of grief and hope. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story. The morning after my confrontation with Max at the hotel, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Alice's words from the night before echoed in my mind: "You need to protect yourself, Emma, legally and emotionally." I called in sick to work and spent the morning researching divorce lawyers. By noon, I had an appointment scheduled with Patricia Lawson, a highly recommended attorney known for her no-nonsense approach. As I was about to leave for the appointment, the doorbell rang. My heart sank when I saw Daisy, Max's mother, standing on the porch. "Emma," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "we need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. Daisy had never been my biggest fan, and I braced myself for an onslaught of accusations. To my surprise, she sat down on the couch and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I had no idea Max was capable of this." I felt my defenses crumbling. You believe me?" Daisy nodded, pulling an envelope from her purse. "I found these in Max's old room at our house. I think you should see them." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Max with Carol, dating back years. My world tilted on its axis as I realized the depth of his betrayal. "How long?" I whispered. "Based on the dates, at least 5 years, Daisy replied, her voice heavy with regret. 5 years, half of our marriage. I felt like I was going to be sick. "I confronted Max," Daisy continued. "He tried to lie at first, but, well, the evidence was irrefutable. Emma, I want you to know that I'm on your side in this. Whatever you need, I'm here." I looked at her, stunned by this unexpected alliance. "Thank you, Daisy. That means more than you know." After Daisy left, I called Alice in a daze. "Can you come with me to see the lawyer?" I asked. I don't think I can do this alone." Alice arrived just in time, and we drove to Patricia Lawson's office together. As I recounted my story to the lawyer, showing her the photographs Daisy had provided, I felt a strange mix of pain and relief. "Mrs. Morrison," Patricia said, her voice firm but kind, "based on what you've told me, you have a very strong case for divorce. But I need to ask, are you sure this is what you want?" I took a deep breath, feeling Alice's supportive hand on my arm. "Yes," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. "I'm sure." As we left the lawyer's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Max. "We need to talk. Please come home." I showed Alice the message, my hands shaking. "What should I do?" Alice's eyes flashed with protective anger. "You don't owe him anything, Emma, but if you want closure, maybe this is your chance." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Will you come with me?" "Of course," Alice replied. "I'll be right there with you." As we drove to the house I once shared with Max, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I knew I wasn't alone. Max was waiting on the porch when we arrived. His face fell when he saw Alice, but I cut him off before he could protest. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Alice," I said firmly. Max's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you beyond forgiveness, but please, can we try to work this out?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man I had loved, the life we had built together, it all seemed like a distant dream now. "No, Max," I said, my voice steady. "We can't. I've spoken to a lawyer. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us, final and irrevocable. As I watched the reality of our situation sink into Max's face, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This wasn't the end I had ever imagined for us. But standing there with Alice by my side and the truth finally out in the open, I knew it was the beginning of something new. A life that was truly my own. The day I decided to leave, Max dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. Alice had helped me pack my essentials the night before, and now we stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes and memories. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" Alice asked, her eyes filled with concern. I nodded, my throat tight. "I have to do this, for myself." Just then, the front door opened, and Max walked in. He froze when he saw the boxes, his face a mask of confusion and fear. "Emma? What's going on?" he asked, his voice trembling. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I'm leaving, Max. I can't do this anymore." His face crumpled. "But we can work this out. I promise I'll change." "It's too late," I cut him off, my voice surprisingly steady. "I know about Carol. I know it's been going on for years." Max's face drained of color. "How did you? It doesn't matter how I know," I said, fighting back tears. "What matters is that you've been lying to me for half of our marriage." As the reality of the situation sank in, Max's demeanor changed. His eyes hardened, and a cruel smirk twisted his lips. "Fine," he spat, "if that's how you want it. But don't think you're going to take me for everything I'm worth. I've got friends in high places, Emma. You'll be lucky if you walk away with anything." His words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the man I'd married. The man I'd loved for so long. It was like looking at a stranger. Alice stepped forward, her voice cold. "I think you should leave, Max. Now." He glared at her, then at me. "This isn't over," he growled before storming out, slamming the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, my knees gave out. Alice caught me, guiding me to the couch. "Oh, Emma," she murmured, holding me as I sobbed. "I'm so sorry." When I finally calmed down, I looked up at Alice, a new determination in my eyes. "I need to talk to Carol." Alice's eyes widened. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" I nodded. "I need answers, and I need her to know what she's getting into." It took some digging, but we managed to find Carol's address. My heart pounded as we pulled up to her apartment building. "Do you want me to come with you?" Alice asked. I shook my head. "No, I need to do this alone." Carol's face when she opened the door was a mix of shock and guilt. "Emma, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, pushing past her into the apartment. For the next hour, I laid everything out, the years of deception, the pain, the betrayal. To my surprise, Carol listened, her face growing more horrified with each revelation. "I had no idea," she whispered when I finished. "He told me you were separated, that you were cruel and cold. I'm so sorry, Emma." Her words should have brought me comfort, but instead they just made me feel hollow. "He's all yours now," I said, standing to leave. "But be careful. The Max you think you know, he doesn't exist." As I walked out of Carol's apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Max. "I'm sorry. Please come home. We can fix this." I stared at the screen, a war raging inside me. Part of me wanted to believe him, to go back to the life I thought we had, but the larger part, the part that had been growing stronger with each revelation, knew there was no going back. With shaking hands, I typed out my response. "No, Max, we can't. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings." As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally on the right path. I looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. It was time to start my new life, on my own terms. The hospital corridors felt different that morning. Whispers followed me, and colleagues averted their eyes. I tried to focus on my work, but an undercurrent of tension made it impossible. As I was changing an IV bag, Carol's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Emma Morrison!" I turned to see her storming towards me, her face contorted with rage. Patients and staff alike stopped to stare. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You ruined everything," Carol shrieked. "Max lost his job because of you." My heart raced. "What are you talking about?" Carol's laugh was bitter. "Don't play innocent. You told his office about us, didn't you? They fired him this morning." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I didn't tell anyone." "Liar." Carol lunged at me, her nails raking across my cheek. Everything happened in a blur. Security guards appeared, restraining Carol as she continued to scream accusations. My supervisor, Dr. Patel, pulled me aside. "Emma, what's going on?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I possibly untangle this mess? Dr. Patel sighed. I think you should go home, Emma. Take a few days off. But my patients? We'll cover your shifts, she said firmly. This situation, it's become a distraction. We need to sort this out before you can return. I felt like I was drowning. Am I being fired? No, not fired, but suspended, pending an investigation. I'm sorry, Emma. I stumbled out of the hospital in a daze. My phone buzzed incessantly. Missed calls from Max, texts from Alice asking if I was okay. I ignored them all. When I got home, I found Max waiting on the porch. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes disheveled. What have you done, Emma? He asked, his voice breaking. I pushed past him into the house. I didn't do anything, Max. This is all you're doing. He followed me inside. My doing? You're the one who told my office about the affair. They fired me, Emma. My career is ruined. I never told your office anything. I shot back. Maybe you should ask your girlfriend about that. Max's face crumpled. Carol? She wouldn't. Wouldn't she? She showed up at my work today, Max. She attacked me in front of everyone. I've been suspended. The reality of the situation hit us both like a tidal wave. We stood there, two people who had once promised to love each other forever, now reduced to this. What are we going to do? Max whispered. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but exhaustion. There is no we anymore, Max. You need to leave. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Alice. Emma, are you okay? I heard what happened at the hospital. I felt the last of my composure crumble. Alice, I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. I'm coming over, she said firmly. Don't do anything until I get there. I hung up and turned to Max. You need to be gone by the time Alice arrives. He nodded, defeated. As he walked out the door, he paused. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. In the span of a few hours, I'd lost my job, been publicly humiliated, and watched the last vestiges of my marriage crumble to dust. As I sat there waiting for Alice, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it was a new feeling, a fierce determination. I'd hit rock bottom, but I refused to stay there. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a victim. It was time to take control of my life, no matter the cost. The days following the hospital incident blurred together in a haze of anxiety and sleepless nights. I was trapped in my own home, afraid to face the world outside. Alice had become my lifeline, bringing groceries and updates from the outside world. It was Alice who brought me the news that would change everything. Emma, she said, her voice gentle but urgent. You need to see this. She handed me her tablet, open to a local news site. The headline made my blood run cold. Local executive fired over affair scandal. Wife accused of sabotage. As I read the article, my hands began to shake. It detailed Max's firing, painting me as a vengeful wife who had orchestrated his downfall. Worse still, it mentioned my suspension from the hospital, implying I was unstable and potentially dangerous. This is insane, I whispered. How can they print this? Alice's eyes flashed with anger. It gets worse. Look at the comments. I scrolled down, feeling sick as I read the vitriol directed at me. Strangers calling me a liar, a cheat, hit a homewrecker. My reputation was being shredded before my eyes. Just then, my phone rang. It was Dr. Patel from the hospital. Emma, she said, her voice strained. I'm sorry, but given the recent publicity, we're going to have to let you go. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. But I didn't do anything wrong, I protested weakly. I know, but the board feels your presence would be disruptive. I'm truly sorry. As I hung up, feeling numb, Alice squeezed my hand. We're not going to let them get away with this, she said firmly. It's time to fight back. With Alice's encouragement, I made an appointment with Patricia Lawson, the divorce lawyer. As we sat in her office, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Mrs. Morrison, Patricia said, her eyes sharp. Based on what you've told me, we have a strong case for defamation. But I need to know, are you prepared for what comes next? This could get ugly. I took a deep breath, thinking of everything I'd lost, my marriage, my job, my reputation. I'm ready, I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. I want my life back. Patricia nodded, a hint of a smile on her face. Then let's get to work. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal documents and strategy sessions. We filed for divorce, citing Max's infidelity, and prepared a countersuit against the newspaper for defamation. Just as I was starting to feel like I was regaining control, the final blow came. I was leaving Patricia's office when I saw them, Max and Carol, walking hand in hand down the street. They looked happy, carefree, as if the chaos they'd caused didn't matter at all. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I was marching towards them. "How dare you?" I hissed, my voice shaking with rage. "How dare you act like nothing's wrong when you've ruined my life?" Max's face paled. "Emma, Save it," I cut him off. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I want you to know that I'm done being your victim. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win." Carol sneered. "Good luck with that. Who's going to believe you over Max?" I felt a surge of determination. "The truth will come out," I said, my voice steady. "And when it does, you'll both regret ever crossing me." As I walked away, leaving them stunned on the sidewalk, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt truly alive. Back at home, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by legal papers and newspaper clippings. My hands shook as I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. It was time to call in reinforcements, time to tell my story, on my terms. As the phone rang, I took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would define the rest of my life. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered. "Daisy," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's Emma. We need to talk." The courtroom fell silent as I took the stand. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice remained steady as I recounted the painful journey of the past few months. Max's betrayal, Carol's vindictive actions, the loss of my job and reputation. I laid it all bare. As I spoke, I caught sight of Daisy in the audience. Her face, once so judgmental, now showed a mix of sorrow and support. Our conversation weeks ago had changed everything. "He's my son," she had said, "but what he did to you was unforgivable. I'll testify on your behalf." Her testimony, along with the evidence we'd gathered, had been damning. Now, as I finished my statement, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The judge's verdict came swiftly. The defamation case against the newspaper was successful, and Max was ordered to pay substantial alimony. But more importantly, my name was cleared. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us. Alice, ever protective, shielded me from their questions. But I paused, realizing this was my chance to reclaim my narrative. "I want to make a statement," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. Facing the cameras, I took a deep breath. "To anyone who's ever felt powerless in the face of betrayal, I want you to know, you're not alone. Your truth matters. Don't let anyone silence you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. With the settlement money, I was able to start fresh. I found a new apartment, applied for nursing positions at different hospitals, and even enrolled in a writing course, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage to pursue. One sunny afternoon, as I was unpacking boxes in my new place, there was a knock at the door. It was Daisy, holding a small potted plant. "A housewarming gift," she said, a tentative smile on her face. "And an apology for everything." I invited her in, surprised by how natural it felt. As we sat drinking tea, Daisy opened up about her own past, a failed marriage, the struggles of single motherhood. For the first time, I saw her not as Max's mother or my former adversary, but as a woman who'd faced her own battles. "I'm proud of you, Emma," she said, squeezing my hand. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." As Daisy left, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The pain wasn't gone. I knew it would take time to fully heal, but it no longer defined me. That evening, I sat on my new balcony, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Alice. "Dinner tomorrow? The whole gang wants to celebrate your fresh start." I smiled, thinking of the supportive circle of friends who'd stood by me through it all. They were my chosen family now, and with them by my side, I felt ready to face whatever came next. As the sky turned from orange to deep purple, I pulled out the journal I'd started keeping. On a fresh page, I began to write. Today marks the beginning of my new chapter. The past few months have been the hardest of my life, but they've also shown me what I'm capable of. I've lost a lot, but I've gained something invaluable. The knowledge that I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. This is my story now, and I'm the one holding the pen. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of anticipation building inside me. Tomorrow was a new day full of possibilities, and I was ready for it. All of it. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what life threw my way, I would face it head-on, with courage and grace. Because now I knew the truth. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. And that strength, it was just the beginning. The phone's shrill ring pierced the quiet of our Sunday afternoon, shattering my peaceful reverie. I glanced at James, my husband of 30 years, who raised an eyebrow over his newspaper. With a sigh, I heaved myself off the couch, my 7-month pregnant belly making the simple act a chore. "Hello?" I answered, expecting my sister Laura's cheerful voice. Instead, I heard my younger brother Edward's excited chatter. "Helena, you won't believe it, I'm getting married." I blinked, momentarily stunned. Married? Edward, that's wonderful. But isn't this a bit sudden? I didn't even know you were dating anyone seriously. Oh, come on, sis. Don't be such a wet blanket. Rebecca's amazing. You'll love her when you meet her. I frowned, a nagging worry settling in my chest. When exactly are you planning this wedding? Next month. Edward's enthusiasm was palpable through the phone. We don't want to wait. When you know, right? John, I caught James's concerned look from across the room. Edward, sweetie, I'm due in 2 months. I'm not sure I can... Please, Helena. Edward's voice softened. It would mean the world to me if you were there. You're my big sister. I need you. My resolve crumbled at his plea. All right, I'll be there, but promise me you'll be careful, okay? After hanging up, I turned to James, who was already shaking his head. You're not seriously considering traveling in your condition, are you? I sank back onto the couch, my mind whirling. I have to, James. Something doesn't feel right about this. Edward's always been impulsive, but this is extreme even for him. James set aside his paper and took my hand. I understand your concern, but think about the baby. It's not safe for you to travel so close to your due date. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his concern. I know the risks, but I can't shake this feeling. Edward needs me. I'll be careful, I promise. 2 weeks later, I found myself stepping off a plane in my hometown, my back aching and my feet swollen. I hadn't told Edward I was coming. I wanted to surprise him and maybe get a chance to assess the situation without the influence of his new fiancée. As I waddled through the airport, I spotted a familiar face. Laura, I called out, waving to my sister. Laura rushed over, her face a mix of joy and concern. Helena, what on earth are you doing here? You shouldn't be traveling. I hugged her as best I could around my belly. I had to come. Have you met this Rebecca? Laura's expression darkened. Once, she seemed nice enough, but there's something off about her, Helena. I can't put my finger on it. My worry deepened. If level-headed Laura had concerns, then my instincts were right. Where's Edward now? At home, I think. Want me to drive you there? 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of Edward's modest bungalow. As we approached the front door, I heard raised voices from inside. You can't invite her, Edward. She'll ruin everything. She's my sister, Rebecca. Of course she's coming to the wedding. I exchanged a glance with Laura before knocking firmly on the door. The voices inside immediately hushed. Edward opened the door, his face lighting up with surprise and joy. Helena, what are you doing here? Before I could answer, a petite blonde woman appeared behind him, her eyes narrowing as she took in my pregnant form. You must be the sister, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I'm Rebecca, Edward's fiancée. As I met her gaze, a chill ran down my spine. In that moment, I knew my journey here wasn't just about attending a wedding. It was about protecting my brother from a storm I could see brewing in Rebecca's eyes. The tension in Edward's living room was palpable as Rebecca's saccharine smile failed to reach her eyes. I forced a polite nod, my protective instincts kicking into overdrive. Edward, can we talk? I asked, my gaze never leaving Rebecca's face. Privately? My brother's warm hand on my shoulder guided me to the backyard, leaving Rebecca and Laura in an uncomfortable silence. As we stepped onto the patio, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Helena, I'm thrilled you're here, but what's going on? Edward's brow furrowed with concern. Is everything okay with the baby? I took a deep breath. choosing my words carefully. Edward, I'm worried about you. This wedding, it's all happening so fast. Are you sure about this? His face clouded. Not you two. I thought at least you'd be happy for me. I want to be, I insisted, reaching for his hand. But I barely know Rebecca, and from what I've seen so far, she seems intense. Edward pulled away, his eyes flashing with hurt. You've known her for all of 5 minutes, Helena. How can you judge her like that? I'm not judging, I said softly. I'm just asking you to slow down and think this through. Marriage is a big step, and you've only known her for what, a few months? When you know, you know, he repeated his earlier words, but this time they lacked conviction. I pressed on, my heart aching for my little brother. What about her family? Have you met them? Do they approve of this whirlwind romance? Edward's hesitation spoke volumes. They're coming around. It's complicated. Complicated how? I probed gently. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Rebecca's parents are very traditional. They weren't thrilled about us living together before marriage. That's part of why we're rushing things. My alarm bells were ringing louder now. Edward, you can't base such an important decision on what her parents think. This is your life, your future. I know that, he snapped, then immediately softened. I'm sorry, Helena. I know you mean well, but I love Rebecca. She makes me happy. I was about to respond when a movement caught my eye. Rebecca stood at the kitchen window, her face a mask of fury as she watched our intimate conversation. Our eyes met, and I saw something dangerous flash in hers before she disappeared from view. Turning back to Edward, I lowered my voice. Just promise me you'll think about what I've said. Take some time to really get to know Rebecca and her family before you commit to forever. Edward nodded reluctantly. I hear you, sis. I'll think about it. As we made our way back inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Rebecca stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, her earlier fake sweetness replaced by barely concealed hostility. What a touching family reunion, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I hope you're not trying to talk Edward out of marrying me, Helena. That would be terribly disappointing. I felt Edward stiffen beside me. Rebecca, it's not like that. Helena's just looking out for me. Of course she is, Rebecca sneered, because clearly I'm not good enough for her precious baby brother. Laura stepped forward, ever the peacemaker. I'm sure that's not what Helena meant at all. Why don't we all sit down and get to know each other better? But Rebecca was on a roll. Oh, I think I know exactly what she meant. You all think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, let me tell you something. Her tirade was cut short by the sharp ring of my cell phone. I fumbled to answer it, grateful for the interruption. Helena? James's worried voice came through. Is everything okay? I've been trying to reach you for hours. As I reassured my husband, I caught Rebecca's calculating gaze. Something in her eyes made me shiver, a premonition of trouble to come. I knew then that my concerns were just the tip of the iceberg, and that this family drama was far from over. The next morning, I woke to the sound of raised voices drifting through the thin walls of Laura's guest room. My back ached as I struggled to sit up, my pregnant belly making every movement a challenge. I recognized Edward's voice, pleading with someone. Rebecca, please, you're overreacting. Helena's just looking out for me. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against it to hear better. Looking out for you? Rebecca's shrill voice cut through the air. Is that what you call it when she's trying to seduce you? My jaw dropped. What on earth was she talking about? That's ridiculous, Edward protested. She's my sister, for God's sake. I saw the way she was touching you yesterday, Rebecca hissed. The way she looked at you. It's sick. I'd heard enough. Throwing open the door, I marched into the living room, my face flushed with anger. How dare you? I shouted, startling both Edward and Rebecca. Rebecca whirled to face me, her eyes blazing. You! I knew you'd be eavesdropping. Trying to come between us again? Edward stepped between us, his hands raised. Please, both of you, calm down. This is all just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Rebecca screeched. I understand perfectly. Your sister can't stand the thought of you being happy with someone else. She wants you all to herself. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's disgusting, Rebecca. I'm happily married, and more importantly, Edward is my brother. What's wrong with you? Rebecca lunged forward, her face contorted with rage. What's wrong with me? You're the one who can't keep your hands off your own brother." Before I could react, she shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, my arms flailing as I tried to regain my balance. Time seemed to slow as I felt myself falling, my pregnant belly suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. "Helena!" Edward's panicked voice was the last thing I heard before my head struck the corner of the coffee table. Pain exploded behind my eyes as I crumpled to the floor. Through the haze, I heard Edward shouting and Laura's footsteps thundering down the stairs. A warm, sticky sensation spread across my lower body, and a horrifying realization dawned on me. "The baby," I gasped, clutching my stomach. "Something's wrong with the baby." Laura was at my side in an instant, her face pale with shock. "Edward, call an ambulance. Now." As Edward fumbled for his phone, Rebecca stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't mean to," she stammered. "I didn't think she'd fall." "Get out!" Laura snarled, surprising me with her vehemence. "Get out of this house before I call the police myself." Rebecca fled, the door slamming behind her. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain that was now radiating through my abdomen. "Helena, stay with me," Laura urged, squeezing my hand. "The ambulance is on its way. Everything's going to be okay." But I knew it wasn't okay. The wetness beneath me was growing, and I could feel my consciousness slipping away. My last thoughts before darkness claimed me were of my unborn child and the family I might never see again. When I came to, the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room greeted me. The steady beep of monitors filled the air, and I felt the pull of an IV in my arm. Panic seized me as I remembered what had happened. "My baby," I croaked, my throat dry and scratchy. "Where's my baby?" A nurse appeared at my side, her kind face etched with concern. "Mrs. Thompson, you're awake. Try not to move too much. The doctor will be here shortly to explain everything." "Please," I begged, tears welling in my eyes. "Just tell me if my baby is okay." The nurse hesitated, and in that moment of silence my world shattered. Whatever she was about to say, I knew our lives would never be the same again. The doctor's words echoed in my mind as I stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. "Mrs. Thompson, your baby is stable, but we're monitoring the situation closely. The fall triggered early labor, and we've managed to stop it for now. However, you'll need to remain here for observation." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a surge of anger. Rebecca had nearly cost me my child. As I lay there, a soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, expecting to see James or Laura. Instead, an older couple I didn't recognize entered the room. The woman's face was pinched with worry, while the man's expression was unreadable. "Mrs. Thompson?" the woman asked hesitantly. "I'm Judy, and this is my husband Patrick. We're Rebecca's parents." My body tensed immediately. "What are you doing here?" Patrick stepped forward, his voice smooth and practiced. "We wanted to express our deepest apologies for our daughter's behavior. What happened was inexcusable." I narrowed my eyes, suspicion creeping in. "Where is Rebecca?" Judy wrung her hands nervously. "She's indisposed at the moment. We're handling this situation on her behalf." "Handling it?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Your daughter assaulted me and put my baby at risk. This isn't something you can just handle." Patrick raised his hands in a placating gesture. "We understand your anger, Mrs. Thompson. That's why we're here to discuss a settlement." The word hit me like a slap. "A settlement? You think you can buy your way out of this?" "We're simply trying to make things right," Judy interjected. "We're prepared to cover all your medical expenses and offer additional compensation for your pain and suffering." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people thought they could waltz in here and throw money at the problem their daughter had caused. "I don't want your money," I said firmly. "I want justice. Rebecca needs to face the consequences of her actions." Patrick's demeanor shifted, his eyes hardening. "Mrs. Thompson, be reasonable. A legal battle would be messy and drawn out. It would cause stress for you and your unborn child. Surely, a quick and quiet resolution would be best for everyone?" The implication was clear. They thought they could intimidate me into silence. But they had severely underestimated me. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my room right now before I call security." Judy looked panicked, but Patrick remained calm. "Think about our offer, Mrs. Thompson. We'll be in touch." As they left, I pressed the call button for the nurse, my hands shaking with rage. When she arrived, I asked her to contact the hospital's legal department immediately. Hours later, as I finished giving my statement to the police, James burst into the room, his face etched with worry. "Helena? I came as soon as I heard. Are you all right? The baby?" I reached for his hand, drawing strength from his presence. "We're okay, James, but something terrible has happened." As I recounted the events of the past 2 days, including Rebecca's parents' visit, James's expression darkened. "They tried to buy you off? After what their daughter did?" I nodded, feeling exhausted but resolute. "They think I'm some helpless, desperate woman they can bully into submission, but they're wrong." James squeezed my hand. "What do you want to do?" I met his gaze, my decision already made. "I want to fight, not just for me but for our baby. Rebecca and her family need to learn they can't treat people this way." "Are you sure?" James asked gently. "It could be a long, difficult process." "I'm sure," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I won't let them get away with this. Whatever it takes, we're going to see this through." As James nodded his support, I felt a mix of determination and fear. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face whatever came next. Rebecca and her parents had no idea who they were dealing with, but they were about to find out. The hospital room felt suffocating as I sat up in bed, surrounded by James, Laura, and my lawyer, Sarah. The constant beeping of monitors served as a grim reminder of how close I'd come to losing my baby. "Mrs. Thompson," Sarah began, her voice steady, "I've reviewed your case. We have a strong argument for assault and battery against Rebecca. However, her parents' attempt to settle complicates things." I clenched my fists, anger bubbling up inside me. "I don't care about complications. I want justice." Sarah nodded, her expression grave. "I understand, but you need to be prepared for a difficult battle. The Millers have resources, and they're not afraid to use them." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Edward poked his head in, his face etched with worry. "Helena, Rebecca and her parents are here. They're insisting on speaking with you." My heart raced as I looked at James. He squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You don't have to see them if you don't want to." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "No, I need to face them. Let them in." Rebecca entered first, her earlier fury replaced by a mask of contrition. Judy and Patrick followed, their faces unreadable. The tension in the room was palpable. "Helena," Rebecca began, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." I stared at her, unmoved by her performance. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Rebecca. You could have killed my baby." Patrick stepped forward, his tone businesslike. "Mrs. Thompson, we've come with a final offer. Double what we proposed earlier, plus a written apology from Rebecca. All we ask is that you drop any potential charges." I felt a surge of indignation. "You think you can just throw money at this problem and make it go away?" Judy's facade cracked, revealing a hint of desperation. "Please think about your family. A long legal battle will be stressful for everyone, especially in your condition." "My condition?" I spat, my anger boiling over. "The condition your daughter put me in?" Rebecca burst into tears, clinging to Edward's arm. "Eddie, please tell her I didn't mean it. Tell her we can all move past this." I watched my brother's face, seeing the conflict in his eyes. For a moment, I feared he might side with them. But then Edward gently removed Rebecca's hand from his arm. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, but what you did, it's unforgivable. Helena and her baby could have died." Rebecca's tears stopped abruptly, her expression hardening. "Fine. If that's how you all want to play this, so be it. But remember, we tried to be reasonable." As they turned to leave, Patrick paused at the door. "This is your last chance, Mrs. Thompson. Once we walk out, all offers are off the table." I met his gaze, my resolve stronger than ever. "Get out, and don't come back unless it's with your lawyer." The door slammed behind them, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Laura was the first to speak, her voice filled with awe. "Helena, that was incredible. But are you sure about this?" I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. "I'm sure. They need to learn they can't bully people into submission." James kissed my forehead, his eyes shining with pride. "Whatever you decide, we're behind you all the way." Sarah cleared her throat, bringing us back to reality. "Mrs. Thompson, if you're certain about pursuing legal action, we need to move quickly. The Millers won't waste time building their defense." As I looked around at my family's supportive faces, I felt a surge of strength. This fight wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it. Rebecca and her parents had underestimated me, thinking I was just a vulnerable, pregnant woman they could intimidate. Little did they know they had awakened a fierce determination in me. I would see this through, not just for myself, but for my baby and for anyone else who might fall victim to their manipulations in the future. "Let's do this," I said to Sarah, my voice unwavering. "It's time to show the Millers exactly who they're dealing with." The day of my hospital discharge arrived with a mix of relief and apprehension. As James helped me into the wheelchair, I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. The halls seemed to stretch endlessly as we made our way to the exit, my hand protectively cradling my still swollen belly. Just as we reached the sliding doors, I heard a commotion behind us. My heart sank as I recognized Rebecca's shrill voice. "Helena, you can't do this to us!" I turned to see Rebecca storming towards us, her parents trailing behind with panicked expressions. James stepped protectively in front of my wheelchair, his jaw clenched. "Rebecca, this isn't the time or place," he warned. She ignored him, her eyes wild with desperation. "You're ruining everything. Do you have any idea what you're doing to my family?" I felt a surge of anger, momentarily forgetting my physical discomfort. "What I'm doing to your family?" "You assaulted me, Rebecca. You put my baby at risk." Security guards approached, drawn by the escalating scene. Rebecca's father, Patrick, tried to pull her back, but she shrugged him off. "It was an accident," she screamed. "Why can't you just let it go?" Before I could respond, James stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Let it go? My wife could have lost our child because of you. And now, I think it's time you knew something." He turned to me, his eyes seeking permission. I nodded, knowing what he was about to reveal. "We filed a legal complaint against Rebecca and her parents," James announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Assault, battery, and attempted coercion. Our lawyer is handling everything." The color drained from Rebecca's face. Judy let out a strangled gasp, clinging to Patrick's arm. For a moment, the hospital lobby fell silent, the tension palpable. Then, Edward appeared, pushing through the gathering crowd. His eyes widened as he took in the scene before him. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Rebecca whirled to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Eddie, please! You have to stop them! Tell them it was all a misunderstanding!" I watched my brother's face, seeing the conflict in his eyes. This was the moment of truth. Would he stand by his fiancée or choose his family? Edward's gaze moved from Rebecca to me, then back again. I held my breath, silently willing him to make the right choice. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't defend what you did. It's over. The wedding, us, all of it." Rebecca's anguished wail echoed through the lobby. She lunged forward, her hands outstretched as if to grab Edward, but the security guards intercepted her. "You can't do this," she shrieked as they restrained her. "I love you, Eddie. We're meant to be together." As the guards escorted Rebecca and her shell-shocked parents away, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The adrenaline that had been keeping me going suddenly drained away, leaving me feeling weak and shaky. James knelt beside my wheelchair, concern etched on his face. "Helena, are you all right?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Edward approached us slowly, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have listened to you from the beginning. Can you ever forgive me?" I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "There's nothing to forgive, Edward. You're my brother, and I love you." As we finally made our way out of the hospital, I felt a glimmer of hope. The worst seemed to be behind us, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Rebecca and her parents wouldn't give up so easily. Looking at James and Edward, I steeled myself for whatever might come next. We had weathered this storm together, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them as a family. The days following my hospital discharge blurred together in a haze of legal meetings and family discussions. Edward had moved in with us temporarily, still reeling from his broken engagement. I could see the guilt eating away at him, despite our reassurances. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch trying to find a moment of peace, Edward joined me, his face etched with worry. "Helena," he began hesitantly, "Rebecca's been calling nonstop. She says she has something important to tell me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Edward, you can't seriously be considering—" "I'm not," he interrupted, holding up his hands. "But she sounded different. Desperate. I'm worried she might do something drastic. Before I could respond, James burst through the front door, his face pale. Helena, Edward, you need to see this. We followed him inside to find Laura staring at the TV, her hand covering her mouth in shock. On the screen, Rebecca stood outside our local courthouse, surrounded by reporters. I'm here to tell the truth, she announced, her voice trembling. Edward Thompson and his family have been manipulating and threatening me. They're trying to destroy my life because I wouldn't go along with their sick family dynamics. I felt the blood drain from my face as Rebecca continued her tirade, spinning a web of lies that painted us as the villains in her story. Oh my God, Edward whispered, sinking onto the couch. What have I done? James muted the TV, his jaw clenched in anger. This is slander. We need to call Sarah right away. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was our lawyer. Mrs. Thompson, I assume you're seeing the news. We need to act fast. Can you come to my office immediately? The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. We met with Sarah, who outlined our options, her voice grave as she explained the potential ramifications of Rebecca's public accusations. This could seriously impact your case, she warned. Not to mention the damage to your reputations. We need to counter this narrative quickly and decisively. As we left Sarah's office, a familiar voice called out, Helena, James. I turned to see Judy and Patrick hurrying towards us, their faces a mix of desperation and shame. Please, Judy begged. You have to help us stop Rebecca. She's out of control. Patrick nodded, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine fear. We never meant for things to go this far. We just wanted to protect our daughter. I felt a surge of anger. Protect her? By letting her assault me and then trying to buy our silence? We know we were wrong, Patrick and Rebecca. She's not well. She needs help, not a public spectacle. As they pleaded their case, I saw Edward's expression change. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. Edward, what are you doing? I asked, a sense of dread building in my stomach. He looked up, his eyes filled with determination. Ending this, once and for all. Before any of us could stop him, he hit send on a tweet that would change everything. I, Edward Thompson, hereby state that all accusations made by Rebecca Miller are false. She assaulted my pregnant sister, endangered my unborn niece-nephew, and is now attempting to manipulate the public. I have evidence to support this, which I will be sharing with the authorities. The silence that followed was deafening. Judy let out a choked sob, while Patrick's face drained of color. Edward, I whispered, do you realize what you've done? He nodded, his expression a mix of relief and resignation. I'm choosing my family, Helena. I'm choosing the truth. As we stood there, the weight of Edward's decision hanging in the air, I realized we had reached a point of no return. The climax of our family drama was unfolding, and there was no telling how it would end. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Rebecca's number flashed on the screen. With a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for whatever storm was about to break. As I answered Rebecca's call, her hysterical voice filled the air. You've ruined everything. I'm coming for you, Helena. You'll pay for this. The line went dead, leaving us in stunned silence. James immediately called the police, while Edward and I exchanged worried glances. We need to get you somewhere safe, Laura insisted, already gathering our things. But before we could leave, a commotion outside caught our attention. Through the window we saw Rebecca's car screeching to a halt in front of the house. She stumbled out, her eyes wild and unfocused. Edward, she screamed, how could you betray me like this? We watched in horror as she pulled something from her purse. A glint of metal that made my blood run cold. A gun. James moved to block the door, but Edward pushed past him. I have to face her, he said, his voice trembling but determined. As Edward stepped outside, I felt a surge of protective instinct. Despite James's protests, I followed my brother, my heart pounding. Rebecca, Edward called out, his hands raised. Please, put the gun down. We can talk about this. Rebecca's laugh was hollow, bordering on maniacal. Talk? It's too late for that. You've taken everything from me. I stepped forward, ignoring James's frantic whispers to come back. Rebecca, this isn't the way. Think about what you're doing. Her gaze snapped to me, eyes blazing with hatred. This is all your fault. You turned him against me. Time seemed to slow as Rebecca raised the gun, aiming directly at me. I heard James's shout, saw Edward lunge forward. but all I could focus on was the barrel pointed at my swollen belly. In that moment, a strange calm washed over me. I met Rebecca's gaze, my voice steady. "Is this really who you want to be, Rebecca? Someone who would harm an innocent child?" Something flickered in her eyes, a moment of doubt, of humanity breaking through the madness. Her hand trembled. Suddenly, sirens pierced the air. Rebecca's head whipped around, panic replacing rage. As she turned back, Edward tackled her to the ground. The gun skittered across the pavement as police cars swarmed the scene. In the chaos that followed, I found myself enveloped in James's arms, his tears mingling with mine. Laura rushed to us, her face pale but relieved. As the police led Rebecca away, I caught a glimpse of her face. The mask of anger had crumbled, leaving behind a lost, broken woman. For a moment, I felt a twinge of pity. Judy and Patrick approached us, their faces etched with shame and regret. "We're so sorry," Judy sobbed. "We never imagined it would come to this." I took a deep breath, years of tension and fear finally releasing. It's over now. We all have healing to do. In the weeks that followed, our family began the long process of recovery. Rebecca was charged and entered a psychiatric facility. Edward threw himself into therapy, working through his guilt and heartbreak. As for me, I found strength I never knew I possessed. The ordeal had tested us all, but it had also brought us closer together. James and I welcomed our beautiful daughter Lily into the world, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Lily in my arms, Edward joined me. His eyes, once clouded with pain, now held a quiet peace. "Thank you, Helena," he said softly, "for never giving up on me, on us." I smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. That's what family does. We stand by each other, no matter what. As we sat there, watching the sun set on another day, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had weathered the storm, faced our demons, and come out stronger on the other side. Life would never be perfect, but with love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family, we could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Our story wasn't just one of revenge or justice. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. As Lily cooed softly in my arms, I knew that the best chapters of our lives were still to come, and this time we'd write them together, as a family, united by the trials we'd overcome and the love that had seen us through.